Do not attempt to adjust your settings. We have commandeered this channel and are now streaming our pirate broadcast. This is the Pirate Stream. Welcome to the Pirate Stream, Dialectical Dissidents, episode 25. Courtney here, joining me again today. That might be the reason we didn't do that last time. Give me 1 second. I was testing something new.
This is the pirate.
There we go. Oh no, that's why. It's the apologize, guys. That was actually the YouTube channel playing. Anyway, episode 25. Thank you for joining us today. A lot of interesting partisan conversations to get into today. And the crowd strike conversation, the Trump assassination. We actually had set a day a couple of weeks from now to talk about a lot of stuff, and we kind of bumped it up because we wanted to get in and talk about all this. So first off, how are you today? Good to see you back in here.
Thank you. I'm doing well. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah,
so much going on. So.
Well, it just never stops.
I know,
right? And let us know in the chat in general how the audio is, and make sure that everything sounds equal and so on, and make sure we keep that up to date. Kind of still in the development process here. Like we said, we're going to get some new stuff coming soon. Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
but we had a really interesting conversation last time. The whole two-party illusion overlap with a lot of, we got into interesting like religious overtones. And one of the things I was kind of interested in discussing today, along with the two-party illusion and the different, partisan narratives, is this like deification of Donald Trump or any, I mean, this again, it's as much as it's not the same drive from like the left per se, it's a similar concept. Even interestingly enough, like you were talking about last time, that it's more so on that side, like becoming God yourself as some kind of like superseding concept. Anyway, I find that really fascinating. And so I wanted to start today. What we're generally going to get into, as I said, is the crowd strike conversation, what that it relates to. We're going to talk about the Donald Trump attempted assassination and our different opinions on that, because Courtney and I haven't talked about this yet. And then start really with a two-party illusion conversation that overlaps with J.D. Vance and these different, and a great interview with Whitney Webb on the Jimmy Dore show that I wanted to play a couple clips about and, break down why I think this is such a threat. And it's really, the sound is good. Awesome. Thanks for telling us. I know it's something that we tend to talk about a lot, but I mean, I don't know. You tell me what you think. I personally, other than the obvious, I find that the conversation of the two-party illusion and the same point, like the looking to somebody like a god, this is the deification of Donald Trump or any other leader, is such an important and an alarming. It gets worse every day, and it applies both sides. But I feel like it's something that we're always talking about. Do you find it as relevant and important as I do in this conversation?
Yeah, well, I'm seeing it as typically, it's a split. You've got on the two extremes. You've got on the one side the people who think Trump's like a messiah. He's going to save us, and it is like a deification. And in some ways, I think this. I do think it was an assassination attempt, but I think the result
that's
of
the evidence points for sure right now.
Yeah. I mean, I know there are people still arguing against that.
Good.
But,
argue, question, right? But I agree with you. The evidence we have to follow, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that is really what the evidence indicates. And I think that, but the result does have the impact of, enhancing for some people this kind of deification. They're using that as a justification for their belief. But then you have the other side where people think he's literally the Antichrist.
Right. It's equally ridiculous.
Which is, it's so ludicrous to me. He's human. Last time I checked, there are no perfect humans. He's a politician. I think I told you last time what J.Edward Griffin said, how all politicians are con men.
Right.
You never met a con man you didn't trust.
Right.
So I'm not one of these. I'm not quite as polarized on Trump. I'm not one of these people who thinks Trump is, the greatest thing that ever walked planet Earth. I certainly don't think he's a god or a messiah. But I'm also not one of these people who thinks he's like a deep state Kabbalist and, that was a double entendre, I guess. But I don't think he's like in on the evil, sinister plans. Like he's just this maniacal villain, the Antichrist, so to speak. I think he's done some good things. I think there's some things I wish he didn't do that I take great issue with. But as far as like a disruptor, I actually do think, given the options that we have. If we think that there is any power at all in that position. And I also really want to drive this point home is that and I think this is intentional, this kind of the weight that is placed on the president. And that is not how our Constitution is designed. That is not how our structure of government was designed at all. In fact, the three branches were completely diametrically antithetical to that. You know, they were created to create checks and balances. So the president is not supposed to be the dictator. He is not supposed to have that much power.
Right.
Do I think that, you know, he fundamentally loves America? He likes the founding principles of America and is trying to do something to preserve that. I actually do. Do I think that he makes compromises? Because when you're at that position, I don't think you can possibly survive. And I mean that literally, as we just saw, you know, if you don't. So, you know, I think we have to weigh all of these things because unfortunately we don't live in a utopia. And despite what some people think, that's not possible in this 3D realm, at least not as far as I believe. So I think we have to work with, but that doesn't mean that we just like sit back and say, oh, well, you know, we trust the plan or God has it or, you know, whatever the paradigm that you subscribe to is, you know, I think we still have to do whatever it is that's in our power in order to, you know, preserve the free will of humanity, because that's what I see is at stake.
Yeah, if we found ourselves in a utopia tomorrow, they'd be arguing about what type of utopia we should have. You know, and that's it's always everyone's gonna have their own opinions, right? Now, I don't know if I share your I would argue hopeful perspective of Donald Trump. I you know, but as I've said 1,000 times, I always hope the people that perceive our rulers to be the savior or the person that's going to change things in a better way. I hope you're right. I mean, I don't know why anybody would hope otherwise, right? But I just think there's a lot of indication that I think shows that most of what we're dealing with, and look, I could give the point of potentially loving this country, but maybe loving it for different reasons than I think we might want, you know, the ability to manipulate the way that they can through the way our system is set up. But either way, my point, I would think that they may act in many ways that would be perceived on some sides to be in a positive way. I find them all to be opportunists, politicians, you know, and again, I hope I'm wrong, but I want to go back to one point really quickly that it overlaps with what we talked about last time. It's interesting. And I don't want to go too hard on this because I'll fall into this conversation like that. It's so it's interesting, but the idea of the Antichrist conversation or the savior, which is, it's interesting that we have people on the right who see him as the savior. And I mean, and the reality, this is not like an analogy. There are people that are explicit about this. God did this. God saved him. God, which that's to each person's personal. I hate the overlap with politics. I frankly find that wrong in every way. It's a personal decision, you know, discussed with overlap with politics, I think misleads people. But it's interesting that you have the idea of Donald Trump as the savior and then the other side with the Antichrist, but except from a religious perspective. I was actually just looking for like the exact phrasing. The idea is that the Antichrist would be presented as a person, right? And so it's odd that they would lean into that when it's not, I don't know, it just seems kind of like counterintuitive. I guess my larger point is the willingness from either side to overlook basic facts and what they believe to get what they want.
Yeah, well, I actually think that it's an intentional psyop. I do think the narratives are being diametrically fomented. And you know, on the side of, it's really interesting, just taking like the other narrative of what I believe was the assassination attempt. There are a lot of people who are saying, no, this was an inside staged event. And you have two sides, too. Right? What?
Not just that it's on the right and it was staged. Like it's so many
you have it on both sides. So you have kind of like the, you know, kind of Q-esque kind of people who are like, it was staged, but it's good because he's a white hat. And this means he is the Messiah and he's going to save us.
That seems like a leap right there. But,
but you have people saying this, you know, this is, you know, a God plan and this is all good because it's, you know, it's about saving America and that's going to be great for the world. And, you know, so you have people who really believe that. And then you have the people on the other side who think that it was an inside, you know, staged event that he was in on. And that's because he's you know, he's part of the deep state and he's part of the cabal and he's here to subvert from within. And so it's just really interesting. You had these two, right? Like even from the same, you know, extracting from the same event. And it's perpetuating these narratives. And I agree with you. It's it's fascinating. I think it's kind of terrifying.
It is.
But people, on both sides are falling right into it. So
I mean,
I do think it's by design.
I do too. And it's interesting. You know, regardless of what they think the reality is, if Trump wins, they'll all high five anyway and go forward on the same side, even though it's like extremely like counterintuitive arguments, right? And what's interesting though is that if is like going back to the main point along all of them is that, Trump good, America good,
Right.
And whatever the logic is, why it happened, it's all because, which is just, it seems counter to the facts, in my opinion. Like if you just look like the idea that if America is, controlling, that's good for the world. I mean, look at the history. That's not true, right? It's just, that's simply not the reality. And that's not because Americans don't want good things. It's because our governments have pretended to be what we want and then did whatever the hell they wanted. And that goes back as far as you can look.
I would say it's because they've colluded with bad forces.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's this kind of blind desire to see the hope without, not like hope for it, but to manifest the hope over the top of a situation that is not even close to that. Right. That's what worries me about all of this. And we'll talk about the assassination attempt because I'm with you on where the evidence points right now, but it'd be fun for us to get into some of the nuances because there are some questions. And my point was,
I don't claim to have the answers. I mean, there's a lot of questions,
a lot of anomalies. And to your point, a lot of the right are pointing them out too. They may just have a different perspective on what that adds up to.
Right.
But I mean, there's, in my opinion, nobody honest and objective right now should be looking at the kind of presented narrative as if that just lines up because it just doesn't. And it's not conspiratorial. You got people within, even corporate media to some degree, kind of tangential, or people within law enforcement, high level, that are coming out and going, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
And we'll get into that. Sure. But so we started about the conversation of the two-party illusion. And I wanted to start with this point, which to a quick point at the beginning overlaps with the idea of the Trump assassination attempt, which is interesting to me. Now, I just wanted to show this. That was interesting. I posted on Truth Social about my coverage on this. And I think that was this one, I believe, or no, this one here. Evidence mounts showing official story on Trump shooting is false. Again, not to say stage or anything, just simply objectively presenting it, showing that what they're saying doesn't add up what you think it amounts to. That's, we can talk about that. Sure. But I posted that, and then Truth Social put it behind a sensitive content warning, which I found very interesting. I just thought that was fascinating because I mean, again, it could be because they think something's graphic. I'm not trying to jump to conclusions, but it seems kind of different than what we're used to seeing. Oh, I just thought this was funny. This guy says, probably because you're a libtard, vaccinated Biden kiss ass, best my guess. It's the assumption, the aggressive, I just used a meme saying, you thought wrong, dude, from Back to the Future 3. Right. But even further going, but you probably got injected more than once. And like this idea that you can't have these opinions or challenge something that they hold sacred without having to be on the other side of the paradigm. And I think this is what both left and right can't see past. If you support X, Y, and Z, you're a MAGA supporting white supremacy. Like they just can't get past it. Right. And I'm hoping that's less. I think that's less than the majority right now. That's my personal opinion. I think there are conservatives and liberals that are starting to really push back on these general perspectives, but they still will lean to their sides. I just think it's interesting. So that on the idea of kind of the Trump mindset, I wanted to start with this clip that Alex put out. And this gets into the idea of Hillary Clinton, the, I guess, rumor going around that she'll be replacing Joe Biden, even though I don't see that verified anywhere. And the point he makes in this about ending, I think it's this clip about ending the Ukraine war, about being sent by God. And these are kind of the points I just wanted to start on. We can talk about it. So let's listen to this first, only a minute and a half.
All right, folks, it's Saturday night, and we saw the Hill, all the news reporting Hillary set to replace Joe Biden. I called Roger Stone, I called other sources. They said, yeah, that's the word. They're really going to try to replace Joe Biden in Chicago with Hillary Clinton, with all of her criminal activity, all of her background, all of this. So they are literally involved in a Democrat civil war, a power struggle over what puppet gets control. Biden had a closed election. He had a closed primary. That was all rigged. He stole the election 4 years ago, tried to take Trump off the ballot, and now Hillary is swooping in to be the nominee above Big Mike, Gavin Newsom, Governor Whitmer, Kamala Harris, all of them. This is huge. It's all over the news. They're actually going to try to do this. Is how arrogant and crazy they are. So Hillary Clinton thinks, with the deep state behind her, that she's going to be there because they want her. She wants World War III with Russia. She said that. And Trump says he'll end the war. He talked to Zelensky today. So to stop World War III, we got to get President Trump elected. But that warmongering, evil monster Hillary thinks that she is about to swoop in and last minute be the nominee, and then they try to steal the election. It's not going to work. They already tried to kill Trump. We're in epic times. Pray for Trump. Pray for America. Pray for the world. And I think Hillary's going to fail again. She was going to be the Madam President. Newsweek printed up all the magazines. She was the president. It's all a lie. Hillary Clinton, you'll never be president. Just like the neocons and the Bushes and all of them, you're done. Your time is over. America's coming together. God bless everybody. I'll be covering this all live at Real Alex Jones on X. Please follow me at Real Alex Jones on X. But pray for America, pray for peace, because this is dangerous.
And breaking news, Joe Biden drops out and endorses Kamala Harris. Doesn't mean that that's going to be the one that actually steps in. Right. Funny enough, we literally I got this text while that was playing and popped it up. So it's just not that I wasn't that far ahead. But what's interesting about this first, and we can come back, well, unless you got comments since we just showed this, go ahead.
Can be unburdened by what has been.
Yeah. I just find this so interesting. So what I was going to get into,
will be, but yeah.
Well, I was going to get into is the point about, whole secret squirrel sources and all this. Spoke to people who this is going to happen. There's a lot of this that goes around. I mean, this has been posted on different sites. This has been a floated concept. There's a lot of people out there that will look to their ideologues that will say this is going to happen. It kind of tapping into what might be. There's a lot of this, like, they're always right kind of mindset,
right.
And the problem is that it's very easy to float the things that you think, and then nobody pays attention to the ones that don't actually happen. Right. So it's important, first of all, from either side to see that, because they exist across the paradigm. But so there's a lot of points in there. Right. So just because, by the way, now that Joe Biden, this is being reported, it seems, by CBS. So again, that doesn't mean that it's real. Question corporate media too, as well as the fact that because he endorses Kamala Harris does not therefore mean that somebody else might not get pushed in.
Right.
I quite frankly think it a hard sell for probably one of the most hated politicians in our history to be pushed in front.
I kept saying I did not think they'd run her because I just don't think she's likable enough.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, I guess that only matters if we think the vote translates to the outcome, but I think that if the perception matters.
But even the perception.
Yeah. Well, before we go forward on some of those points, I wanted to get into the idea of being sent by God, ending the Ukraine war, all these different ideas. But let's just take a quick look. I will just skim this. It doesn't look, well, it's a little bit long. Let's see what it says in the beginning. But President Biden announced Sunday, so that is today, that he's dropping out of the race, which isn't hilarious. Can we just talk for a second about how dumb it is that it's like I said before, where they go, I'm absolutely not going to run next year, no matter what. And then they later go, okay, fine, I'm going to run, even though that was always the plan.
He had to drop out before August 7th. Otherwise, he loses 3 swing states, like automatically.
Okay, interesting.
So, like if he dropped out later than August 7th, like if he's going to drop out, they had to do it before August 7th.
Interesting. And so what are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is always the plan? Do you think this is something that just happened, they gave in, or like, where do you place this? Just your opinion.
With Kamala?
No, with just Biden leaving. My point was getting to the fact that they kept saying it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
I think they've been building up to it. I don't think they would have let him do the debate.
Exactly.
Unless they had planned it. That's kind of a little foreshadowing, like, hey, this guy's not quite up for prime time. And that's their way of, foreshadowing it, so you can see and set, kind of set the tone. So I think they wouldn't have let him do the debate if they weren't planning to take him out.
I agree. I think that's self-evident. I mean, like the idea, if they take so much time to pick like what color tie they're going to wear, they think about the way that and I think this was about the controlled demolition. And that's a very popular opinion. Exactly. It's easy to see. Yeah. So whether this was, obviously I think that suggests that the idea was this was something that was planned and they wanted to show resistance for some reason. Like, no, we don't want to leave, but we have to. Well, so why do you think that is?
I do think there's genuine resistance from Jill.
Yeah.
I think Jill really wants him to stay.
The real person in power, is that what you're thinking?
Well, I don't know how much power, but I think she thinks she has a lot of power.
Yeah.
And at least the illusion and the accoutrements and, whatever prestige she thinks she's getting, the doctor that isn't a doctor.
Right.
So I think she actually really does want him to stay, stick it out. Do I think that the rest of the party? No. I mean, I think he's a puppet, and it's really obvious. I think part of them even keeping him even this long is a gaslighting to the American people. And I think that the effect of that gaslighting on both sides has real consequences where they can control people, because the people who are, supporters are being, their cognitive dissonance has to go through the roof because it's so obvious that he's not really in charge. He's barely in charge of his own faculties. And no,
sorry, this jumped in my head. So do you think that is more of an indication? I think we agreed on this last time that it seems a lot of these things are almost being, whether it's the intention or not, are clearly driving support to Donald Trump. So would you think of it as one more element of like, like you're right, because for everybody with a brain is going, come on, clearly he can't. So it makes you go, well, why would I have to support somebody else? So either RFK or Trump.
I think it's driving polarization, which is their intention, because the people who are being gaslit and who really support Biden, you know, their cognitive dissonance only increases.
Yeah.
And so they have to dig their heels in deeper. And so that creates more friction between those who are like, this is a puppet, like you're an idiot.
Right.
I'm not saying that. I'm just, you know, like this is how people are engaging with each other.
Hey,
you know?
I'll call you Nettie if you're looking at somebody who can barely tie his shoes and pretending like he's making policy, you know.
Yeah.
Probably not going to happen.
It's it's a bit naive,
Yeah.
to put it politely. But so you know, the people who on one side are saying, you know, yeah, you're an idiot. How could you believe that? But then the other people who do or who have shown support, I think they're going to dig their heels deeper, which creates polarity. And I think if anything that the parasite class wants and thrives off of is the tension, the friction, the chaos, the splitting and the fighting. So they want people divided. If they could get civil war, I think they'd be very pleased. I think that the movie Civil War was a kind of operational preparation of the environment, to use a military term. I do think so. Do I think that they're going to achieve it? I certainly hope not. And I don't actually really think it's even leading that far into that direction as much as they want to portray it as being so.
Well,
but
again,
I think they'd like it.
and you well know my opinion of the InfoWars of the world and the different, there's plenty of good stuff that comes through there, but let's see. I've kept highlighting the clear push, especially post-assassination attempt. One of the main shows was, InfoWar to now Civil War. It's like, where is that being picked up from? Like, you could always argue this could be leading to Civil War, but after that, that seems like, I don't know, that felt like more kind of the same agenda to, push that into your mind. Civil War. It seems dangerous in my opinion, but I do think that that's interesting. The movie, again, another one of those movies that kind of seems to like have no end. It's just kind of like this series of propaganda pushes throughout the movie.
Trend. It's so awful.
Like what's the one with the Obamas made? What's it again? I forget now, but it was the one that it was
Leave the World Behind.
Yeah, right. And it just seemed like this one after another kind of like psychological opposite. Like it didn't have any like beginning or end. It was like this very strange, and I feel like most people seem to suggest that they fell asleep during that movie, which makes me worry. It's like something like more
hypnotic kind of programming.
Something's going on here, but that's interesting, So I definitely see that
I think
drive.
Part of like not having a beginning, not having an end, it does have the hypnotic effect, and it also has. As humans, we want to create meaning out of things. We don't like things that are just random and out of place, out of context. So we fill in the gaps. And that's part of like hypnotic suggestion. Yeah. And I think that's the purpose of that style. I personally hate it. It leaves me kind of like angry and frustrated.
Totally. Well, I mean, that's
like, you robbed me.
Right. The whole point, not only of the money you paid to see it, but any resolution. Yeah. Like movies are supposed to have some kind of conclusion to them. That's how any plot goes. You're supposed to have something. But you're right. Maybe there's a reason for that. It keeps you like in this unfinished feeling. You want to fill the gap.
You want to tie the bow.
Yeah.
And I think we do that and there's so much messaging that we end up filling in the gap with, and who knows what subliminal programming they do for us to do that.
That's a really interesting point. And whether like subliminal other things as well, that's clearly involved, but like even just removing that, the simple idea of presenting a story that doesn't seem to conclude, but in your mind, you will piece together like the way you might want to see that solved. Yeah. And you would like subconsciously, that's interesting. Whether that drives you to then like act that out in your life. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what I think their intention is in doing that.
That's fascinating. Well, so back to the point. Actually, I want to really quickly, just in case something jumps out at me. So he announced Sunday they dropped out of the race, a seismic event that will leave Democrats scrambling to select their replacement. Quote, while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of the party and the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties for president. So what changed, Biden? Like, if that's the case, what today suddenly made you think different than yesterday? That we all know. It wasn't, I think they knew this the whole time, right? Yes. Silly. Mr. Biden said he would address the nation later this week. I'm sure that will be exciting. Shortly after the announcement, he endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for the nomination. Nothing seems too gripping. Never before has a sitting president with presumptive nominee dropped out of the race. There's a precedent at least, or something you haven't seen before. Decision to underscore severity of the crisis that enveloped his campaign. Debate performance. Yeah, right. This is so orchestrated. Like, obviously it wasn't the debate that suddenly showed this. It was clear long before that, but you guys know all this.
My favorite line, Trump is funny. When he said, oh, well, I don't really understand what he said, but I'm not really sure he knows what he said.
Right. It was perfect. Yeah. So we'll leave it there then. But it's interesting, the timing though. So actually, for the sake of this conversation, it's only a minute. Let me play this again and I'll stop it. Let's go over some of these points. This is what Alex was saying. Yeah, I think this was the 20th, which is yesterday.
Saturday night, and we saw the Hill, all the news reporting Hillary set to replace Joe Biden. I called Roger Stone. I called other sources. They said, yeah, that's the word. They're really going to try to replace Joe Biden in Chicago with Hillary Clinton, with all of her criminal activity, all of her background, all of this. So
if that happens, then sure enough, right? I'll be the first. He was right. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But what's funny is she's one of many obvious potential picks in people's minds. Michelle Obama comes up, right? And so if you pick any one of these and go, my inside sources say, you might end up being right.
If you just think strategically, it's like the revenge play,
right? But would that work though? Like, I don't think Democrats like Hillary Clinton.
No, I'm not. But if you just think like cinematically, right? If we're thinking like a football game, kind of like here's the underdog who's going to come back to seek the revenge, and this is going to be the justice is served. Kind of, I can see them really playing that narrative. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying I could see how, like,
the right
from a screenwriter
or just the general narrative managers.
I think the left.
Okay,
I think the Democrats are going to really play this up if he's correct, if they do end up pushing Hillary.
Oh, I see what you mean. So play it up if it happens, like really hype the idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
This is a revenge play.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, Trump against Hillary.
I just don't see it as being in any, like, again, I'm the first that's going to say that I don't believe that any of that matters. I think this is a selected reality that we're being manipulated in. But nonetheless, you said the perception that I don't see how that makes sense in any political idea, right? She was very unliked. I mean, there's a core support for her, but most people, even on the Democrat side, don't like her. There's a lot more than anybody criminals air around her. I mean, we saw the Boston guys, however long ago, present like this scathing presentation of pay to play that, by the way, nothing happened about on either side, by the way. But, you know, the kill count, which is very real. I mean, all these different Haiti in general, the crowd strike we're going to get into, the overlap on the emails. I don't know how in the world they would pretend that would logically make sense, because you're going to see a lot of digging into the dirt, aired out. So I don't know. I find this to be one of the most unlikely possibilities, but hey, maybe he's right.
I didn't personally think it was likely, and I was kind of surprised he even said that. But I can see how from a storytelling kind of arc.
Right. If you're within the theater mode and like for the two-party illusion, sure, it makes a good story.
That would kind of be the pinnacle of this two-party, and here's the populace versus like the
if that's the reality,
Democrat. Right? And you're talking about like digging into the dirt, but the reality is I'm always shocked by this. But a lot of the masses are not digging into the dirt. A lot of the masses are still glued to the MSM, and they're just, they're kind of still in the fog.
I still have a hopeful feeling about the overall picture, that I think more people than not are not necessarily awake to everything, but just, at the very least, confronting that cognitive dissonance right now, going, wow, this is uncomfortable. I know something's wrong. That's a good thing. We should need to capitalize on that.
I agree with that.
That's why we get such hard push like this at this time from left and right to try to grab them back into the paradigm. That's what I would see it as.
I
interesting.
Agree with that. Yes.
They are literally involved in a Democrat civil war, a power struggle over what puppet gets control. Biden had a closed election. He had a closed primary. That was all rigged. He stole the election.
So he means there's a civil war within the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
4 years ago, tried to take Trump off the ballot, and now Hillary is swooping in to be the nominee above Big Mike, Gavin Newsom, Governor Whitmer, Kamala Harris, all of them. This is huge. It's all over the news. They're actually going to try.
And by the way, the news is a lot of, I'll show you the supposed, which I think is funny. Twitter actually fact checked him and said, nope, it's all rumor. It's Twitter of all places. It's funny, but it's all conjecture.
Yeah.
I looked into this all morning trying to find any definitive piece. It's all like Clinton seems like the likely choice, stuff like that.
Right.
Like, so it's interesting because what a great source Roger Stone is, because clearly he's the one he called. Must be the case.
To do this is how arrogant and crazy they are. So Hillary Clinton thinks, with the deep state behind her, that she's going to be there because they want her. She wants World War III with Russia. She said that. And Trump says he'll end the war. He talked to Zelensky today. So to stop World War III, we got to get President Trump elected.
We're going to talk about that next, because I think this is one of the most ridiculous concepts. All of this is based on Trump saying he would end it in 24 hours with nothing around that. It's like saying, I have a plan.
Right.
Oh, good. He's got a plan. Like there's nothing around that plan. It's just words. It worries me that people lean into those kind of things, you know?
Well, I think they lean into it because nobody else has even that plan.
Well, does he have a plan? He just says he has a plan. My point is it's just a
for
narrative.
him to even have the intention, the desire.
Does he? They're a bunch of words.
I would argue he does.
Well, we don't know is my point.
But if you look through, his presidency, he was never a proponent of war.
I disagree. I know what you're saying though. The perception and what's presented seems to suggest that I will give it at least different than what we see on the other parts of the paradigm. But I'll play a clip in a minute from Whitney. The same point, that he clearly tried to coup Venezuela, which would have been another war should that have happened. He assassinated Soleimani, which is a big deal, and that could have very easily spun out into some larger war. Somalia. There's a lot of stuff that happened. It's a bit of a misrepresentation to say that he was like not a war president and so on. But my point is simply just about Ukraine. That I don't know why we would go. He wants to do this. Biden, you can go on stage and say something and then say Biden wants this. We don't know that. These are political words.
We don't, but I think you're giving kind of the masses are hearing something and they're not hearing that at all from anybody else. So even if he doesn't have, even if he hasn't shown any evidence that there is a clear thought out plan to execute those wishes, he's at least saying that, and that nobody else is saying
fair
that.
enough. Yeah.
So
but he also said lock her up. He said JFK files, 9/11, the Fed, all these things, right?
I get it, but nobody else said that.
Yeah, right. And it worked for him, right?
But and you also don't go back to the idea of how much power does the president have, right? So this is not to over credit Trump. This is just, but I do think there's an element of, unfortunately, too much power has been given to the executive branch.
Absolutely.
But in reality, even with the bloated executive branch and even with all these unconstitutional executive order, they're not dictators. Even now, they don't have full, and you're still battling whether or not you believe, Trump is an insider or you believe that he's fighting the deep state, whatever you want to call them. I call them the parasite class, but they still do have goals and an agenda. And so I can't imagine that even if you thought hypothetically, which I don't, but if you did think that he was a complete insider, he's just there to foment their agenda. He's not going there. They're not going to let him just do everything that he wants. He's going to have some resistance.
One of the theories on the assassination attempt was that to say we'll let you be president again, but you got to stay in line. That's certainly one of the.
I told you when I was there January 6th. I didn't make it to the Capitol because I was still listening to him at the Ellipse. But I had, and obviously I can't prove this, but it was such a strong intuitive feeling. And I think I have told you about this, but the microphone didn't work. It was like 3 tries. And the message I got was like, this was a signal to him. Like, you're not in control. We are. And I saw, it was just like this look on his face where he suddenly kind of froze up, and he's such a, confident, like he's a showman,
Yeah.
And it was so strange to me. But it was so clear. I really saw this shift. And then suddenly the microphone went on. And, again, this is pure speculation.
Yeah.
It's just an intuitive gut feeling that I had, but it was such a strong reaction.
Yeah.
So it would make sense to me that was a signal. Like, hey, play ball with us. Yeah. Otherwise, you're gone.
That's been one of my personal opinion that, there's a lot of different varying type options, let's say, that I think make sense, and why I think not one of them in my mind is that he's acting for your freedom and democracy. That's my personal opinion. But I think that, unless it overlaps with his personal agenda. But I think that, one of the many different possibilities was just that this is a guy that is, same with like a lot of the mainstream independent media is that it's willful ignorance. They're getting funding. They don't really want to look at what ties and whatnot. They don't want to admit to themselves that they might be compromised, but they, are through whatever. And they get, suggestion, but they don't personally outwardly know that. They kind of block it off. The idea that you could easily, more than anything, abuse Trump's hubris. Yeah, that's very simple. I think. I think it's easy for an entity to make him think that he's the smartest guy in the room, and that might be that overlap where he was kind of a wild card. He said the thing, we're there to take the oil. We can't say that out loud. Kind of warn him back, and that would make sense to me. But I would still perceive that it's not in the interest of the American people. But that's my personal opinion. But it's interesting to think about.
Well, I definitely agree about the hubris. I talked about the Mice to Rascals document.
I don't remember.
So this is it's a CIA document. You can pull it off CIA.gov, and they don't say this. They do say it came out of the OSS, But I speculate it came out of the War Office selection boards, which was
Oh, it's a document.
The strategy.
Okay. Got it.
So I think, and that was like it was an arm of Tavistock during World War II, like came out of Operation Phoenix that, led to how they were going to select officials and, and leaders in World War II. And then they went on to use this in the military. And MICE stands for money, ideology. The C is a double entendre. It's coercion and compromise. And then the E is ego. And they were talking about how this is the way to pick assets, people who could be change agents, people who could be, leaders that would serve their means. And they said they later switched it to rascals, that was better. And rascals is, I don't know if I'm going to remember, but it's reciprocity. I think authority. The S is scarcity. L. Yeah.
In any case, it's personality traits they can abuse.
Yeah, but the mice, the ego part, I always think of, I think that's a huge part of why Trump was a good kind of.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think that's an easy thing. We should consider that with everybody. I mean, it's easy to manipulate people's traits like that. And I think that's a classic tactic. But, my point back to the Ukraine war was simply that I think that it's, I think that it's obvious that the statement could be taken however you want it to be taken. Right. And he's an expert at that, of laying it right down the middle and letting everybody assume what he means by that. For all we know, that could mean he's going to nuke Ukraine. You know what I mean? Like It could mean anything. We're going to end it 24 hours. I personally don't think it means he's going to do something to end this in the way that most people want, which is, what's interesting is it's actually divided even in the Republican Party, but this gets into the discussion about what Russia was actually, the legalities around it, the story behind it in the first place with the Donbass and the Azov movement and the CIA. And, this is not just some Russia bad guy invading Ukraine reality, and so it's interesting. I personally think that what this amounts to is, let's put it this way. My prediction when he's elected is he will continue funding Ukraine. That's what I think. I really do. Because I've already seen that. He's already stated that in a previous interview, that he would continue to fund Zelensky. Now he just kind of floats it more in the middle about ending it with a deal. And that's what a lot of people seem to want to, they want to believe that. And I would too. But
I definitely got some thoughts on that. Before that, I just want to clarify. I found it. I pulled it. I guess I pull this up so often it came right up. But so the first one is they call it a reciprocation. So it's reciprocity. The second one is authority. And third one is scarcity. Then it is C is commitment and consistency. The C's always have double entendres, I guess. And then the L is liking, and the S is social proof. I honestly think the mice kind of covered it all. That basically says the same thing. They just changed the name to something, I don't know, that they thought was more palatable. But I think that is how they pick them. And I do think it came out of the War Office selection boards. But so with Ukraine, I think that is really interesting because they're doing these, I've talked about the AI World Society. They talk about, they've done these symposiums on rebuilding Ukraine. And they say how Ukraine is decimated by the war. We need to send lots of support and funding over to Ukraine so we can rebuild it. We tear it down so we can build it back better. And the reason they want to rebuild it is because it's going to be the central hub for all the smart city nodes around the world. And so it's going to be, the main locus for where all these other 15-minute cities, smart cities, C40 cities, right, where they're going to connect to Ukraine. And the Club of Rome has talked about how they're going to use Ukraine for like the economic model. And they've had this discussion about, this discussion where, they appeal to the Club of Rome to help them with their economic planning. And what is their economic planning? Of course, it's this like well-being economy, which is all the sustainable, 17 sustainable goals and tokenization. So it's really all aligned with the UN WEF agenda. Right. So I think that still kind of computes with my theory on Trump. I feel like I personally, and this is just my thought. Obviously, I don't know him personally. I'm not privy on the inside, so I don't know. But I think he would like to resist against it, if possible, if not for his own selfish reasons. But I actually do think it's because he cares about the future of America. He's got a big family. If everybody loves somebody. And I, you know, from what I can see, he genuinely loves and cares about his family and their future. And
most war criminals do.
Most humans really do.
That's my point,
know, like Hitler loved his dog.
Right,
And
right.
yeah. So I do think that he would like to resist it, but how much power does he have to be the bulwark against that agenda? That I don't know. And ultimately, you know, Ukraine is a main thrust for them.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair perspective. And I hope you're right. Right. But I think the problem is it's also kind of a dangerous, but not that you're doing this, but within the paradigm, they tend to, you know, it's a dangerous assumption where you lay that over it. And the implication is that he's doing this for this reason. And then when something comes out, there goes, well, there must be a narrative behind it.
Well,
it's like assuming into what looks otherwise like a problem. You see what I'm saying? And that happens a lot in the paradigm.
My point though is that they have levers of power over him. So I don't know, even if my conjecture is accurate, even if I am right that that's his intent, I don't know how much power he's actually going to have to execute those goals.
That's my point though. And you may be right. And that would completely fit with the way I view
and
this
I don't think
system.
that because he's like, you know, God or the Messiah.
No, yeah,
you know,
I think that's clear.
That.
But I think the point is that fits perfectly with the way I would perceive this broken system. But my point is to assume that that's what I was trying to say. Not that you're doing this, but that the idea would then become, well, he would do it, they just won't let him, right? And then it's like the excuse for the entire administration. Well, they would. That's my point every time about this is that it's always Obama would have changed the world, but the Republicans wouldn't let him. And it's the same back and forth. And it's like, well, at the very least, can't we acknowledge that means the system will never work? No, let's keep voting and let's keep doing it.
Well,
you know, but
I wouldn't say that's 100% accurate because I do think, and we've seen evidence of this. Like I personally seen this. Remember we were talking about last week with the NACS, the Natural Asset Company, right? There was so much pushback.
Oops. Hold on.
Blurry.
Yeah, waving our hands around. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I talk with my hands. I'm not Italian, but I talk with my hands. So with the NACS, I had a defeatist attitude. Like I really thought that they were just going to push it through. My intention in trying to corral people into submitting comments was not because I thought that we were going to get the proposal removed, which is what happened. But it was because the attorney generals had made such a strong case that there was a legal standing for anybody who submitted comments. And my thought was, we need so many people to submit comments so that we have a mass, class action lawsuit.
Yeah.
And, but what happened was they felt enough pushback. Now, I'm not saying that they're not continuing to rebrand, retool, and push this thing forward. They are, but that did derail them. That did slow them down. So I think I want to be really cautious about taking kind of a, defeatist, like the plan is set. Nothing
Totally.
we can do on either side.
Absolutely.
Like, he's God and he's going to save us, or no, like it's already done and there's nothing we can do. So even if, regardless how you feel about him, like even if he took some stances that do slow them down, to me, that's positive.
Yeah, no, I mean, if that was the reality, I agree. But I think that perception can be laid over anything. And then it becomes, well, that it's sort of like, well, you wouldn't, good thing you got the shot because you would have been sicker. You see my point?
Well, I don't see that.
No, I know, but I'm saying it becomes from a dishonest place or a wanting it to be placed. You can lay that over everything. So I'm just saying, I agree with you. What your point was really there is that we should be questioning everything the entire time. We shouldn't fall, which we both agree on, 100%, right? Just within the people that are willing to kind of blind themselves to what doesn't, like we just talked about at the beginning. I think that can be a problem. But for someone like you who's objective, you see my difference there? I think that it's a problem, So let's finish this real quick, and then we'll get into that clip about, I want to play a clip about Whitney Webb talking about the same Ukraine war conversation, but from as I would see it, a nonpartisan perspective. And I just wanted to highlight how very different that feels.
Warmongering, evil monster Hillary thinks that she is about to swoop in and last minute be the nominee, and then they try to steal the election. It's not going to work. They already tried to kill Trump. We're in epic times. Pray for Trump, pray for America, pray for the world. And I think Hillary's going to fail again. She was going to be the Madam President. Newsweek printed up all the magazines. She was the president. It's all a lie. Hillary Clinton, you'll never be president. Just like the neocons and the Bushes and all of them, you're done. Your time is over. America's coming together. God bless everybody. I'll be covering this all live at Real Alex Jones on X. Please follow me at Real Alex Jones on X. But pray for America, pray for peace, because this is dangerous.
Well, so said by God, Ukraine's going to end, all the different stuff we were talking about. So I think it's important to see, and this is, pretty across the board. I see a lot of different discussions. Oh, I thought this was funny. Just, not like any of us should trust our community notes, whether Elon's or not. I think I've seen so many manipulations already, but I think it's funny though that even in that, he's like, follow us on Twitter, Alex on X, always leaning into the Twitter side of this. And here they are, going wrong. That's not true, which as far as I could tell, it was just rumor. Oh, and then I wanted to play this just because I think this is hilarious. Have you seen this? This is such a perfect contrast to, I forgot about this. Oh, that's not important. Let's do this next then. So there's a perfect contrast to what Whitney's going to lay out. Like, it's just so cartoonish to me. Like, somebody made this whole joke about it was a Key and Peele, they said Key and Peele, that show. Anyway, a skit show about this is like a conversation where they were like, let's just get the Hulk and that'll solve all our problems. And then it's just like they bring the Hulk Hogan in for the Trump van. It just seems so artificial to me. I don't know if you've seen this, but watch.
So all you criminals, all you lowlifes, all you scumbags, all you drug dealers, and all you crooked politicians need to answer one question, brother. What you gonna do when Donald Trump and all the Trumpomaniacs run wild on you, brother?
Now, unfortunately, I grabbed this is not the one, it's the same difference, but there's one where he gets up there and he rips his shirt off like he classically did, and it shows the Trump Vance thing, and it's like, it's just all political promotion, and it just feels so, but they went wild for it, and it just seems it's like a sitcom, which is what a lot of people like about it right now. They feel like it's the best reality TV show going on.
Totally.
So it's such team sport politics. So on that note,
they had, why am I blanking on his name? The martial arts guy.
Which one?
Up there too. I can't believe I'm blanking his name.
Martial arts guy?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I didn't really watch
MMA.
much of the RNC, so I don't know.
It'll come to me. I can't believe I'm blanking.
No, shout it out.
You
got
know
it.
too.
I'm sure. Is it the same kind of thing? It's like it's like
totally.
A gimmicky kind of Vote for this because Hulk Hogan was there. Hooray! It's like how about we talk about policy? And,
it is. I mean, that in that way, it's like a football game. I mean,
absolutely. That's exactly. That's equal two-party illusion. Both of them are just as ridiculous in their own ways. So here's Whitney Webb talking about, it's a clip from the interview with Jimmy Dore. We'll play a longer clip in a minute, just about her talking about specifically the Ukraine aspect. Now, again, this whole interview, actually, I'll just show you this first so you can see I guess it doesn't give you that much information on the title, but it says the deep state man behind JD Vance, mind-blowing interview with Whitney Webb. It's funny. Jimmy always just so blown away by her information. And then this article she put out on Unlimited Hangout, the man behind Trump's VP pick, it's worse than you think.
I think so too. But here, I will say this, the VP does not have that much power.
Oh, yeah.
My concern with him is, and I know if you think Trump is all in for the deep state, then it's kind of irrelevant. But if you don't, then I think it gives them even more incentive to really assassinate him, because I think Vance is a much easier pawn. I think
it's a good point. Good point.
Much easier for them to lead by the nose. And
if you're out there listening to Republicans, I mean, this makes a great point. I mean, after you watch all of this, I think it might seem more likely, that would make more sense than all the other conversations about Biden and somebody else switching in, because this is what we'll get into now. And her article is fantastic. It's the Peter Thiel, Palantir, PayPal, Elon Musk, this whole infrastructure that's clearly supporting Trump.
Integralist movement, the whole conversation we had last week about the Theosophical. So the Claremont Integralists, that's definitely relevant. And that's also, they're all in on the Project 2025.
Yes.
Which Trump distanced himself from, but a lot of the Republicans seem to think, that's
they frame it as Trump's thing. I mean, it's very like they really do. They present it.
He distanced himself publicly several times. He's like, this is not, and honestly, most of the people who are backing it, I don't think they've read it. This thing is 1,000 pages. I don't even think they've skimmed it. They have no idea.
It's a little cultish. You read it. It's incredible. It's, I get it. The main premise is, republicizing or whatever the word they use, like, the whole of our politics. But doesn't that seem a little bit odd in and of itself? And then you read into it, it gets a little bit, it's very.
Well, what I really don't like about it is it gives credence to the narrative that the left actually portrays the right as being, the fascists, which we know both are communistic. They're all roads lead to totalitarianism. It was National Socialist Workers Party for a reason. It's the ideological roots are the same.
As we think we've talked about, the two sides of the same problem.
And they intentionally created a dialectic so that you could fight against it. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys.
Right.
And when you look at this Project 2025, it's so authoritarian. Even a lot of the things they say that they're going to do I'll tell you, I mean, I haven't read all 1,000 pages, but I have skimmed it, which I think is more than most people who are talking about it.
Yeah, right. Politicians included.
Right. Yeah. Especially the politicians. But when I look through it, there are a lot of things in there that I'd personally love to see happen, that I actually think would be wonderful. Like if I could just, wave a magic wand and say like this happened, it would be great. But the way they want to do it is through the executive branch. And I'm like, this is unconstitutional. And if you claim to be, I'm not saying you do, like if you claim to be a conservative, which a lot of people on the right do, then you can't say, oh, we need these things accomplished and we don't care if it overrides the Constitution when it's doing what we want.
Right.
You have to be a constitutionalist and you have to go through the channels that are viable through the Constitution. And that's my biggest problem with it. So it gives credence to this idea that the right are actually fascist and authoritarian.
Right. And it's the same part, again, on either side of this where, we have to break democracy to save democracy. It's like the same stupid game where it's, what you end up doing.
A democracy.
Exactly. But you present yourself as, the good guy in the dialectic. And then all of a sudden you are the one that is, we're our, forlorn hero. I have to do it. That way we can get back to the right way. Yeah. And so all you're doing is rationalizing your illegal or however it ends up framing actions.
Yeah.
Because it's what you want. And it's the same way either side. It's exactly the point you're making. And it's everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, right now more than ever. Let me actually play this quick one first, since this is Donald Trump saying the Ukraine line. And so that you get the context of what he's actually saying.
Sure. Would you give Ukraine weapons?
I was
and
impeached
funding?
by a crazy woman named Nancy.
So it starts where she's going. I hate her. I hate all of corporate media and these people. Her especially. I've seen some of the most ridiculous things, but she's really pressing because it's a very partisan narrative to highlight him as like not supporting Ukraine, right? And but she asked, "Would you give weapons?" And he just will not answer the question, and that's what he always does. Is I'll end it in 24 hours. It's like, well, that's not really answering the question, and doesn't that seem suspicious to people? Like you'll see what I mean.
Will you give Ukraine weapons
I was
and
impeached
funding?
by a crazy woman named Nancy Pelosi.
But the question here is, would you give Ukraine weapons and funding if you were elected?
I would sit down. Let me just put it a nicer way. If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in one day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over. It'll be absolutely over.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people. And
do you believe that? Do you actually believe that? Like, really? Do you believe the statement he made right there? Like that his point is, I don't care about winning or losing. Does that sound like a Donald Trump statement to you?
Well, it does sound like a Donald Trump statement. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to believe that.
I do too. I hope.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, and because we've been put into a paradigm to believe that it is about winning and losing. And when you look throughout history, most of these wars that we're told we won, we didn't really win. What does it mean to win the war?
Right.
Right. And how many of the wars have been perpetual that really just went on and there was no winning, losing, and there was never any intention of even winning or losing. There was something completely altogether. And it really, the one thing I will say about him is he thinks in terms of strategy for business. And when you think about, I know geopolitical isn't really the right word. Apparently that's been like, it has more to do with like mapping, but for purposes here, we'll use the term geopolitical strategy, right? And a lot of what happens with war is much more about geopolitical power plays. And so in a way, it really is kind of a business move. They're trying to it's various entities vying for power for empire, right? That's really what this is about. And so I know this sounds like I'm being overly favorable to him, but just given his background, what I know, and again, I don't know him personally, this is, but just as an outsider watching this and what I know through my research of history, that actually kind of makes sense, because the real question isn't about winning and losing, because that's the narrative they want us to see. Oh yeah, we won this war. We're we're this superpower, or with the bad guys won and now we have to take it back. It's it's all narrative.
Right.
When really, if you talk about settling, think about if you settle a lawsuit or you settle like a corporate case, what happens? It's not really a win-lose. It's like, okay, we figured out a way to appease enough people,
right,
Everybody got something. It's not really a win for anybody necessarily.
Right. Especially to
but
settle,
less people, but you're not going to have like the bloodthirst anymore.
Mhm,
You're not going to bleed people dry. When you think about it in corporate case, it's in terms of money. In this case, it's money, but it's also lives.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. My point is more specific to Donald Trump. If you read his books, if you look at anything recreating himself as a Republican, Christian Republican to run for the presidency, I mean, people who actually read his words, I don't believe the persona he's being presented as the president, right? Is very cutthroat, doesn't matter, win, lose. My point is for him to say that, to me personally, seems counter to how he's been prior to being president. Now, maybe he's changed. Maybe being a president has opened his mind to bigger things. I hope you're right. I just don't believe that if first and foremost is the way he sees the world, but I could be wrong. And then secondarily, that answer is really kind of a non-answer in the context of what they're driving towards. And you make a great point, because clearly that's what she's presenting. Right. Win, lose, that's all it is. And if
he's rejecting the premise.
I get it. But I just don't believe, what we'll have to see is when this comes to pass, because I believe he'll be in that position, and then see how that actually plays out, because I think that he's already said before that he would continue supporting Zelensky. Now, maybe that changed. And on top of that, we know that he's been very clear about continuing to support Israel in the ongoing genocide. So I don't really feel that it's about stopping killing lives. I think there's something more to that. I think it's about a wedge issue that's been created for this election. And I think he just wants you to believe either side of it. Now, yeah, I know I'm a pessimist when it comes to politicians in general, but let's let it out.
Okay.
Breaking down this country. Now,
can I just follow up on that? You said you don't think in terms of winning and losing. Mr. President, can I just follow up on that? Because that's a really important statement that you just made there. Can you say if you want Ukraine or
I don't think he wanted. He does. I think he feels the whole time like he's trying to evade the question. That's what it feels like to me.
Russia to win this war?
I want
to ask him, do you want Russia to win this war? Go ahead.
Well, I will also say, I mean, this is not to play partisan. I mean, you could really say this about anybody in the mainstream media, but it is CNN, and
which nobody should trust.
That it's somebody who is trying to frame him in a poor light.
Totally.
So I think he's doing whatever he can not to be trapped in their paradigm.
No, I get it. Yeah. But it's the same we've seen in a lot of these discussions where, right in the beginning, do you this is just from the Israel context, do you condemn Hamas, like kind of thing, and people just wouldn't answer it. I get it, because it's sort of like a trap the way that they're trying to do it. Yeah. But I think that if you were coming from an honest a place that I think that, I don't know, it's all perception, it's all opinion.
I just don't know how honest a place can you be in a dishonest framework.
Well, just state your actual opinion, and that's what I want to see.
But I think he did it by rejecting the parent.
But what the question is more information, right? Go further, elaborate. What do you mean in 24 hours? What are you going to do? Right. And I've never seen that fleshed out. And now we get the sentiment that he'll end the war, as a fact being populated through all conversations. Even Jimmy brings it up in the interview. Right. Well, we know he's going to do this. And I'm like, dang it. I'm all for it. I hope you're right. But I just think it's a little bit naive for us to take a bland middle of the road statement from somebody who's been shown to do that a lot and not follow through as an absolute fact. That's my
I don't think we should take it as a fact, but I don't know that this would be the place where he's going to flush that out.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, because I agree. They're very manipulative, or the embodiment of manipulation. Right.
Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying. Russians and Ukraine.
His mannerisms are so classic. It's just such exactly what. It's just funny. Not.
It is. He is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so again, I get it that my perception, all of our perceptions will flavor the way we see these things. But it just feels like exactly he is an expert at reading what you want him to be.
Yeah.
And that's that perfect answer for people that are like, yes, stop the war. We don't want to pick sides. We just want it to all end. And I just don't believe that's where he's coming from.
He's a master showman.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. I think that's yeah.
Sorry, Instagram censored our show today.
Oh,
I point out every time now.
New and different.
Every single day.
I want him to stop dying. And I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. I'll have it done. You need the power of the presidency to do.
Okay, so how about if then that happens and it doesn't happen in 24 hours?
Right.
Everyone's like, oh, well, they can't do it in 24 hours. Well, exactly how that always goes, right? It's a narrative that doesn't follow through. But I hope you're right. We'll see what happens when it comes around. I think that the actions will depend on what is in the interest of their administration and their financial interest. That's what I would argue. We'll have to wait and see. But so let's listen to Whitney Webb's discussion about this. And this is where this is all kind of coming from my mind, is that I think it's personally pretty self-evident that right now There we go. Right now that the two-party illusion is very, I think, more evident than I've ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that with JD Vance, and this is where it gets into the overlap with people in his administration, that I think it's easy to suggest that this will go any direction, but ending conflict. If it does end, it will be redirected somewhere else, which is kind of like the Iran conversation. JD Vance came hot out of the gate saying, go after Iran, despite previously saying he would never do that.
Right.
So you can decide for yourself. Let's watch this clip and we'll comment on it.
Thiel funded or founded companies have, since Vance was announced, have essentially signaled that they're all in on the Trump Vance campaign. And this also includes Palmer Luckey as well, of the defense contractor Anduril, which is making a lot of unmanned drones and other, defense weapons. It's building our virtual border wall on the U.S.-Mexico border that Trump supports instead of a physical barrier that he used to campaign on. And they're also hugely involved in the Ukrainian conflict. So any sort of possibility of a second Trump administration winding down American aid to Ukraine, I think with Thiel in the equation, becomes questionable right away, because Anduril, Clearview, and Palantir itself intimately involved with the Ukrainian military as it relates to the conflict with Russia.
Well,
so anything that would see their contracts or their bottom line as it relates to their involvement in that conflict, I think it's unlikely that it would whittle down significantly.
Just financial interests, right?
No. Well, and Elon Musk gave $180 million.
I always do this. It's like half a second left. Hold on.
If Thiel has the influence that is to be expected in a second Trump term.
So do you think that is already?
All right, I always do that. Then it's like, come back to it. And it's half a second. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Elon Musk gave $180 million, right? Like he's going to pay it out in increment
it was like 40 something a month.
I think 45 million a month. And it was to pick JD Vance. I mean, that was
right.
Yeah,
and you got the Adelson overlap, 100 million, like all these interests that are not lining up with the end of any kind of war.
A PayPal, right? Thiel,
right.
Elon, yeah.
I've actually brought up some of her past articles on that in general. Like, well, here's the one that I recently did a show about this on the Daily Wrap Up. Palantir joins the Gaza genocide, and this was showing the same people, in regard to right there. There's the Thiel. There is I'll forget what is this guy's name again. I forget now, but anyway, the point is Palantir lined themselves up with these wars overseas. The same thing going on with Ukraine, and she wrote this back in 2018.
Think about Gaza and Ukraine, they've both been designated by the AI World Societies to be major hubs.
Right.
So I don't think we can ignore that.
Yeah,
that seems to be pretty significant.
And you could easily argue that this is something he may not even be aware of, which would be pretty embarrassing, seeing as how it's very front facing. But it's certainly possible that he just believes they want to support him and hasn't recognized that all these interests are, But it's just like last time.
Well, it's one of two things, right? Either it's that his hubris is so great that he's like, yeah, they just love me and they want to support me, and we
just talked about,
I'm on the right track, and that's that's incredibly naive, and he's being swindled, but by nature of his hubris. Or it's the other that he fully knows. Now, if he fully knows, it could go a couple of ways. He could fully know, and he could feel like he has his hand tied. I mean, you look at the other options for VP, and they were not so great.
Well, so we're there. Would you argue that he doesn't have the ability to pick who he wants?
Yeah. I mean, I believe they nearly tried to kill him. That they tried to kill him.
Oh, in that way. Okay. So you think that,
I think he has his hands tied.
So how do we possibly look at this like it's in the interest of freedom if he's being driven by people who just tried to take his life to take action?
The way I see it is that I think he does have the interest of freedom at heart.
Okay.
That's my personal take. And whether that is selfishly driven because he wants his family to thrive, and whatever reason it is, or because he genuinely loves America, I don't know. I'm not inside his head. I can only sit from here. But from where I'm sitting, I think he genuinely does value freedom. And I think, though, that because he values freedom, I do also think he has his hands tied. So I think he's trying to do whatever he can that could possibly derail or slow things down.
Okay, but so just again, the question, and that makes sense, but so that means we have somebody who is effectively saddled by the deep state and making choices for him, and that he's trying to make it less for us. So that's kind of the same. I hope you're right.
Anybody in that position is going to be saddled by the deep state.
Yeah, and so, but that's what's so interesting about this is, so how do you make sense of the last 4 years he spent? Was that just so they won? The deep state?
I think they did.
Okay, so then why would we expect anything different now?
Well,
not that you're going to answer all these
yeah,
questions. I'm just saying it seems like a foregone conclusion that like, I want this to be the case. I want him to be the one fighting, but how can he do that if he's already lost, you know, in a sense?
Because I think that if you really believe we have free will, that means every moment we get to choose. And that means in every moment, like there's always possibility.
Yeah.
Right. And I firmly believe that. That's why I value free will so much. And if you look at, I'm going to go back to the NACS example, just because that's really tangible, and it was something I was involved in. I'm not saying I take credit for that, but I definitely think I had a role. I got a lot of people to submit comments and get a word out, and I think it was a ripple effect. Not just me, but tons of other people, and that's the power of again, that doesn't mean we won. I made that really clear right after.
Positive effect for sure.
But it was a positive effect, and that I made it really clear. I did a whole show saying like we need to remain vigilant. This I don't want people to take this as a sign to be complacent. However, I want people to recognize that this means we do have some power. You look throughout history, they write down their plans, and this is why I keep showing the plan, because even though I get mocked, and I'm like, I was just last night with a group of people, and people were like, this is crazy talk, and I'm like, I can show you all the documentation, like from their words, like the horse's mouth. This isn't me inferring or speculating. When I speculate, I tell you I'm speculating. This is just my intuition. I'll let you know when it's speculation, but if I tell you this is the plans, it's because I've read their plans. But we look throughout history, and their plans don't always come to fruition, and you wonder why. And oftentimes it's a multitude of reasons. Sometimes it's because you have competing factions who are both vying for power, and one side ends up winning in that battle. And it may not be the major overarching plan that we have read, because it was another faction vying for power, and they succeeded. And sometimes it's the will of the people, and it's derailed their plan. They had to re-strategize. They had to reconvene or retool. And so I do think that there is that possibility, and I'm not saying that means that the deep state doesn't have levers of power over him. I think that would be super naive for us to think, and that would be deifying him, like he's just impervious to any of their.
Well, I see where you can go with that, but my point would simply be that so like let's tease this out. So you have somebody in a position who you think wants the best for the country, but is. And I get the argument you're making would be that no matter who got elected, they would be in that position, right? So this is the controlling power, cult whatever you want, the unelected power structure that is essentially driving it. So the argument would be if he stepped out of line and did exactly what the people want, that he would be taken out. Is that what your theory? Just kind of like playing it out.
Well, it depends on what it is.
Right. But but he's acting under the assumption that he has to play it down a little bit in order to get some good done.
I think he's acting under the assumption that there are compromises he will have to make.
Gosh, I just, for me, it's such a hard thing. Like so I guess the point would be in the interest of maybe winning against them in the long run.
Right.
Man, I don't see how that could possibly end up
at all, winning anything. I mean, I think a really good analogy would be, think about a CEO in a company, right? They may have their vision for what they want. And, a lot of CEOs are visionaries. And so they may be very idealistic. They've got all these plans. And then you've got, you've got different corporate interests. You've got
board of directors.
Board of directors. You've got potential investors who are like, hey, you come this way, I'm going to give you this big chunk of money. And it may go against either their vision or their ethics sometimes. And they have to weigh these things out. And sometimes, just give a hypothetical, and I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but we're human. We deal with the choices that we have at hand and the options we see. And let's say somebody, they're like, okay, well, if I take this big injection of money, I have to make a little bit of a compromise here, but ultimately I'm going to be able to do all this good for the company, and a lot of people who have a company, they have some element of mission. It's not just like money, whatever that may be. They think that whatever their product they're creating, or whatever their business does, their service, whatever it may be, that it does some good, right? That there's a need that they're fulfilling.
Right.
And so, they may be willing to take a bit of a compromise, in order to see that to fruition. And I don't think it's, I mean, I would argue we're a corporation, and I think it's
that's
all,
a fact,
all
but
that
yeah.
different. It's just a much bigger scale.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, compromises are going to be made.
I mean, you get fleshed out, it adds up, but I don't know. I think that, the problem is, and this may just be my unwillingness to, like I've said many times in the past, in politics, I find the word compromise to be a dirty word today. I just, because of how easy it is to be manipulated by other people's willingness to do it in good faith. And then that gets abused. Not that we shouldn't be willing to compromise. A relationship, in any relationship, compromise is paramount, right? Yeah. But I think we're at a position now where we've been so lost. I just think, we're like, under that analogy, we're not talking about, money, just money and interest. We're talking about human lives. We're talking about wars. We're talking about starvation tactics and occupation and regime change. And so it's like, I mean, you use the word injection. Money, right? Yeah. What about the conversation of COVID-19 and warp speed? It's like, you could argue, and I had this conversation with my brother, in fact, where, that he had to kind of do it because he had to get what he could. But at the end of the day, what did that amount to? Millions, if not billions of people being killed. I agree. So it's like, you can argue.
I'm not happy about it.
No, I'm not saying this to you. I'm just saying, like, it's an interesting perspective. And again, I hope, I mean, I don't even know if I would hope that's correct, because at the end of the day, it's sort of like, we will never get past this. So it ends up amounting to the fact that the president is effectively saddled by which maybe you're right. Maybe that's always the case. And I kind of think you're right, but that's not the way it's being presented by the Republican Party and the people that want him there.
I know, because they want people to have the illusion that they have more power than
and
they
so
do.
Why wouldn't we just come out and say, here's the reality? You know what I mean? I just think that the dishonesty, I'm never okay with, even if it's, because all that amounts to is, we're going to lie to you for your interest. Isn't that like every other government action we've seen?
Well, yeah. I'm not opposing that that's the reality. I mean, George Washington warned us of this, and you may have your feelings about Washington, but he did. That was his whole farewell address.
Right.
He warned us against having political parties. He warned about the, it being a loophole for foreign entanglement and for subversion within. He didn't use the term, but essentially he was talking about the dialectic.
Right. We have many, in fact, I might have been John Adams, I forget, but warned about the exact conversation of the parties and what that can do to this country.
Absolutely.
That's exactly where we ended up. We had a lot of people warn us, Smedley Butler, and, plenty of people that we just fell right into it. Eisenhower, JFK.
Yep.
Every one of the things they warned about, we have 45 times over now, right?
Yeah. Well, they knew.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting thought. And I think it opens up the door to a different perspective that, it's more down the middle. But I also kind of see how that could be abused by the power structure, I
think it is being abused by the power structure.
Where it's like, well, we get some good and some bad, and it kind of we continue down the same path. Well, it's like, I want to see something different. The dialectic
always progresses, and it always moves left.
Right.
That's
even if the person acting through it thinks they can do it just enough to change something in a positive way, but it just counteracts back and forth,
it does. But my perspective is that, and this may just me being Pollyannic and really overly hopeful, but I really do believe in the power of people and the ingenuity of people, and I think that we can derail things, and I think that there can be. It doesn't mean that we stop the overall plan. I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know. If you come from a biblical worldview, and it's not for me to tell people what to subscribe to, but if you do, I mean, this is all this is where it's going to go, and Satan's ruling the earth. So, but that to me doesn't mean that, regardless of what you believe, it doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing, and it doesn't mean that we can't effectuate some sort of change.
Totally. As an individual, 100%. I think about, and I don't think voting in the way it currently set up is one of those things. It should be, but I think that's been taken from us. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good, we're fleshing out the unknown, but I think that it's a dangerous allowance, because it allows people to keep thinking that they're trying their best, even though it just ends up the same way back and forth forever, and maybe they want to try. I still think that, like, let's put it this way. If it were you, would you buy into that system? Like you want to run for president, and you might have a chance to win. Would you kind of bow to those interests? Like, I'm not taking in like that you might be assassinated, like just in a general sense. Like, would you feel okay compromising in that way to get something done?
I think that the reality of assassination is very real.
I do too.
So, that's why when I talk about levers of power and situational pressures, you don't know what people are up against.
Totally.
And I think
sexual blackmail networks and all that stuff we've talked about.
Yeah. And when you're in that position, I'm not going to say like the most important position in the world, or, but that's how it's presented. And I will argue it's a very, very powerful position. And it is it's a very the scope is very large.
Mhm.
So the types of situations, the types of decisions that you have to make are much bigger than
Yeah.
most people face on a day-to-day.
Right.
The consequences of those actions.
Mhm.
And so when you have to weigh things out, like, well, if this is going to be a choice that I make that may result in my being killed, what does that mean for?
God, I just hate that lever is even in there. Like the idea that you're now going to compromise on what you think is right and fair enough, because you might be killed.
Yeah.
It's like that's,
but it not just you might be killed. What if the levers, your children
Family.
might be killed?
Right.
And for a lot of people, that is a much greater lever.
I'm not going to disagree. I think you're 100% right. I just don't want to accept the other side of that. I just don't accept that we're going to just play along because they might be killed.
Look at a lot of our founding fathers, and I'm not saying they were, perfect. Last time I checked, they're human,
Right.
and they certainly made a lot of errors. But a lot of them took that position. They said, give me liberty or give me death, right?
Right.
And they did not care. Some of them, they even watched their own children be tortured, and they said the freedom was more important. And this is in their writing.
Right.
So
I'm not going to say that I would
that.
be. I don't want to say I would be capable. I don't know to sit there and let that happen. I don't think I would be, but I would agree with the premise. I think that we're at a point in our society where we need liberty or death at this point. That's where, and I'm not advocating violence in any way. I'm using it as an analogy. But the point being is that we should be taking these hard lines. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I on premise, I agree. Philosophically, I agree. But I think that the dynamics of the world have changed to where there might be an element where taking the death,
analogy sense,
and that option, being willing to stand for that potential,
right,
might not have the effect that it
Fair
would have
enough.
had 200 years ago.
Yeah. Very true.
So,
very true.
Because we live in such a different technological age.
That's a great point. It's a great point. But so let's bring this into the next point, which is kind of where all that's coming from, is that, that was great information, and that now that we do know that Vance and Trump are being aggressively funded by people that are absolutely influencing that outcome, you could see them as part of the deep state, right? And however you want to look at it or not. But at the end of the day, is Trump even the one that's effectively making these choices if he's being driven by all this stuff and compromising when it's necessary? And that's the worry. So let's watch this. We'll stop at any moment. Just let me know. Let's watch this clip from today from Whitney or not from today, but posted for Whitney and Jimmy Dore. And this has to do with kind of the larger premise of the article and a lot of overlaps with, both the points we made before, as well as I think CBDCs and a lot of interesting stuff here.
Sure.
The hallmarks of the neocons is, again, conflating the U.S. National interest as it relates to foreign policy with Israeli regional interests. And they're not the same a lot of the time. With Israeli regional interests. And they're not. And one of the hallmarks of the neocons is, again, conflating the U.S. National interest as it relates to foreign policy with Israeli regional interests. And they're not the same a lot of the time. When it comes to Richard Pearl and Peter Thiel, it was actually Richard Pearl who helped Peter Thiel set up Palantir in the early 2000s with Alex Karp and connected them with the godfather of modern surveillance, a man named John Poindexter, who created Total Information Awareness and was previously the highest ranking member of the Reagan administration to be convicted in connection with the Iran-Contra scandal.
He was convicted of five different felonies, right?
Yes. And William Barr covered it all up when he was Attorney General for Bush Sr., and he came back as Attorney General under Trump. And but what's important here is that during Iran-Contra, people like Poindexter, as well as Oliver North, who returned during the Trump administration to pitch Trump alongside Eric Prince with creating a private CIA. Great idea. Just kidding. But anyway, in Iran-Contra, Oliver North and Poindexter and others created this database called MainCore, which contained the names of Americans who were considered unfriendly and could be rounded up during a vaguely defined national crisis that would include a widespread nonviolent against a military intervention abroad. So a massive protest, for example, against a U.S. foreign war. People could be rounded up and the Constitution could be suspended to put these Americans away.
So this is important. This is important. I don't want to breeze over this. So there's a thing called MainCore, and this thing called MainCore, they've set. So Barack Obama repealed habeas corpus, just so you know. Right. So these all things go together. So what does that mean, Jimmy? So they don't even have to give you a trial. If they want to lock you up, they can just say you're a terrorist, and then they can have what they call indefinite detention, thanks to Barack Obama and the 2011 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1021. Now, how this works with Maine Corps is explain to people again. You went a little fast. Explain to people again what Maine Corps is.
Maine Corps is a database that was created by the Iran-Contra people in the 1980s, but it still exists. And it contains names of Americans who are deemed quote unquote unfriendly by the national security state and could be rounded up or incarcerated during a national crisis. And
they actually said this. They actually said this.
It came up during the Iran-Contra hearings, and the hearings were shut down when Senator Jack Brooks tried to ask a question about it. I put the video
is that
in the
what that
article.
Was?
Yes.
Oh, I saw. So that was this Daniel Inouye shut that down. The
Yes,
senator from Hawaii. He shut that down. Okay, so now
there was a Miami Herald report about it, actually, because it involved Cheney and Rumsfeld as well, even though they weren't officially in the Reagan administration.
So they're collecting names of Americans, and I'm sure someone like me would be on that list. And what they would do is this: if they started a war. And they wanted to.
That was very unpopular. There was a financial crisis.
They would just put.
This is why Henry Paulson under Bush in 2008 piloted the idea of declaring martial law across the country if the banks weren't bailed out.
And it's
the same people.
And they could throw people in jail. They explicitly said this, right? So, but Maine Corps didn't go away with Iran-Contra. How did it? No. What's the modern reinvention of Maine Corps?
Yeah, so Maine Corps is the database, right? And it was the same people that created that, which was in use after 9/11, and as far as we know, still exists. The last mainstream media report on it was in 2008, and at that point, it had 3 million Americans on it. And as far as we know, it hasn't gone away, so it's likely more. But the same people that made that made this DARPA program called Total Information Awareness, or TIA.
Right.
And the goal of TIA was to basically combine with Maine Corps, but through data mining, not only decide who gets on the Maine Corps list, but also create sort of this pre-crime paradigm, predictive policing.
Pre-crime. They're really doing this. So this TIA, what does TIA stand for?
Total Information Awareness.
Now, was that a government
the program?
Was that originally a government program? But it's now been
a DARPA program.
It's a DARPA program, but now Palantir is doing this. Peter Thiel.
Now it's Palantir. Yes.
And
so
what is
TIA?
Tell people what that is.
Yeah. So Total Information Awareness was defunded by Congress not long after it was launched because every mainstream media outlet, the ACLU, and organizations like it across the board said this will end privacy for Americans. It's unconstitutional. So it was defunded.
And why? What did it do? What did it do?
It sucked up. It was going to basically spy on all Americans, total information awareness, right? And decide who was going to commit a crime before it happened.
Yes.
Terror attacks before it happened, bioterror, even pandemics before they happened, which is why a lot of the policies that originally Total Information Awareness proposed came back during the Trump administration during COVID. And Palantir was the contractor for all of those. What do you know?
And so immediately after this was invented, you're right, all these organizations pushed back against it. So the government said, okay, we're not going to do it anymore. But then Palantir was like, well, we'll do it because we don't have those.
Well,
go ahead.
It's even worse than that. Palantir didn't exist yet. Peter Thiel created Palantir as Total Information Awareness was getting into trouble and experiencing the public backlash. And as they were setting it up, they used Richard Pearl to connect them with Poindexter, who was running Total Information Awareness, about essentially privatizing the program and having Palantir do what TIA, or Total Information Awareness, had intended to do. And Total Information Awareness, though it was housed in DARPA, was intimately pushed and developed with CIA involvement, particularly the chief information officer of the CIA at the time, a guy named Alan Wade, who was actually a business partner of Ghislaine Maxwell's sister, Christine. Fun fact.
So
But
let me just break in just one more side, just so people realize the scope of what we're talking about, because this is really ominous, right? So, and this has been coming for a long time, and now Peter Thiel and Palantir is at the forefront of this, and so Poindexter's and a DARPA program manager. This is from your article. LifeLog sought to. This is what they sought to do. They sought to build a database tracking a person's entire existence that included an individual's relationships and communications, meaning phone calls, mail, email, all, plus their media consumption habits, their purchases, and much more, in order to build a digital record of, quote, everything an individual says, sees, or does.
Jeez.
LifeLog
this program was LifeLog. Yeah.
This is LifeLog. They would then take this unstructured data and organize it into discrete episodes or snapshots, while also mapping out relationships, memories, events, and experiences. This seems so Aldous Huxley crazy futuristic,
Yes.
but it's not future, it's here now, and they have
it
these
happened decades ago.
and so the
Yeah.
person in charge of this right now, or the person pushing it in the private sector, would be Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel is now responsible for JD Vance's funding and getting JD Vance connected with Donald Trump, and for being a big funder of Donald Trump and JD Vance's campaign right now. And so that's why this is all important.
Yeah, it's also important because Palantir is really a CIA front company.
Right.
So when they created it and picked John Poindexter's brain about how to turn total information awareness into a private company, their first funder was the CIA's In-Q-Tel, and the CIA was their only client until 2008. And between 2005 and 2009, the top engineers at Palantir, according to them, made over 200 visits to CIA headquarters for them to develop their product. As far as this pre-crime stuff goes, I want to go back to Trump's record when he was president the first time. After the El Paso Walmart shooting, Trump called on big tech to surveil its users and in order to identify shooters before they can commit a crime.
Way.
So it was overtly calling for pre-crime. At the same time, Bill Barr legalized pre-crime by creating a Department of Justice program called DEEP that actually has arrested people for Facebook posts.
No, DEEP, DEEP.
It's called, yes. It's a real program, and it's still on the books.
So Bill Barr,
at the same time, he was trying to eliminate encryption also, or at least get a government backdoor into devices that use encryption. And then shortly thereafter, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, along with a close friend of Trump, who's the former head of NBC Universal, Bob Wright, were trying to get Trump to create a new agency called HARPA, a health DARPA. And the first program of that they pitched was called Safe Homes, which is an acronym for something else. And what they wanted to do there was data mine American social media accounts, as well as extract information from Amazon Echoes, Google Home, Fitbits, and Apple Watches, and run it through AI to identify if you've been saying something that shows early signs of neuropsychiatric violence, and then based on that determine if you need to go to a court-ordered physician visit, if you need to be put under house arrest or anything, or put in preventative detention. So this is something that they were talking about back then. And even though Trump allegedly loved the idea, he didn't make HARPA. But you know who made HARPA? Joe Biden did. He called it ARPA-H, just moved the H to the end. But it's the same program, the same people. Are behind it. So this is a bipartisan agenda to try and use our online activity against us. And there needs to be awareness about it, because it's really the only way we can stop it. They have our data. They've had our data, and they've been profiling us with Palantir. They couldn't do it without Palantir. And something needs to be said and something needs to be done. And the fact that there's so many Trump supporters backing this, when they're likely, make up the bulk of the list, people that own guns and care about the Constitution and all this stuff, are going to be the people that the federal government doesn't like. And if you look at the Biden administration's framework for the war on domestic terror, which has been developed by every administration in the post 9/11 era, they make it very clear that domestic terrorists, their definition of it includes people on the left and the right, people that oppose all forms of capitalism. That includes the West's favored stakeholder capitalism or crony capitalism, anything in that, people that are extreme environmentalists, people that oppose perceived government overreach. All of this is considered enough to get you to be considered a threat by the federal government. And this is a national security state apparatus out of control. And I would argue that, you know, with Trump and JD Vance, they are trying to sell themselves as anti-establishment, potentially libertarian and populist. And that is not what these companies are. The fact that Trump is taking money from Palantir and Palantir co-founders, whether it's Peter Thiel or Joe Lonsdale, is very alarming. And their potential influence on the vice presidential pick is also very alarming. Because if people care about reining in the surveillance state or stopping the war on domestic terror, they should be outraged by this, because ultimately what these campaigns are is a way to stifle dissent. And that's what they've been from the very beginning. When you look back at their how it started, you know, during the Iran-Contra era, very alarming stuff. And so I think the more people know about this, the more we can do to stop it.
I wonder what you would propose to stop it.
Well, yeah, definitely.
But that's the elephant in the room, because I think that's actually part of the sum. I'm not saying that everything she said isn't true. I'm very familiar with all of this, actually. I mean, TIA actually is actually where we get GPS from.
Yeah,
And what do you think they're doing with the GPS? Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, and LifeLog is Facebook. You know, we know it's literally
and they go over most of that.
2004.
One of the things she adds, just to take what you were saying, is that ultimately it comes down, which I'd agree with, is to personal action, personal freedom, and you know, not hoping for somebody to save you as a presidential candidate. You know, and that's I would agree with that. But
of course, I agree with that.
It takes a lot to unpack in regard to removing all these problems. But it's very alarming to me what we just talked about and the overlap. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just so. Now you blackpill everyone. You just turn all the Republicans against Trump too, or not even Republicans, because at this point, so many of the people who are supporting Trump are not Republican. And you know, when she made this term, like, you know, the populist, I would argue he is populist, whether that, you know, what they understand, you know, what that encompasses and what the populist movement actually comprehends in terms of the, you know, greater agenda, you know, that might be a different conversation. But I would argue he's a populist choice at this point.
The point was the people that he's leaning in with are fundamentally not. And so it's a question of whether it goes back to your point about whether maybe that's the you know, saddled part of it and he has to. And that's why I just can't even get into that speculation part. You know, for me, it is at the end of the day, these are choices that contradict what we're being presented with. I think that's important.
Right. No, I think that's important too. But so let's just say you take him out of the equation and then what? I mean that really earnestly. Like, then what? So where is I'm not saying I don't believe he's the Messiah. I don't believe he's going to save us. I do believe this system is very much in many ways rigged. I do believe I know what their plans are. All of these, you know, surveillance state apparatus that are within the United States are designed to feed into the AI world society. It's why I keep talking about the AI world society. It's very relevant. You know, when Orwell wrote his book, I mean, it wasn't just like some figment of his imagination. I mean, he was an insider. He knew. He knew what their plans were. You know, there's a reason why when you read these elite texts from 100 years ago, they talk about the technocratic takeover. You know, Elon Musk's grandfather, Hatfield, was the president of Technocracy Inc. in 1933. I probably mispronounced his name, but I can look up the exact. But, you know, he was the president of Technocracy Inc. So, I mean, these plans, these agendas have been in the works for so long. The technology has now just caught up. Now
it's possible.
It's now possible for them to execute their plans. So it's a very real concern. I mean, I just sat at, you know, last night, a group of people telling them, you know, the black pill about JD Vance, and nobody really wanted to hear it. They were, you know, very just swooned by the narrative, and he's this great patriot.
I would say that black pill's the wrong term though, because it's not, that would imply that we're doomed in a sense, right? Where I think you're just presenting the truth, which I think that's a positive step.
But I think the problem is, I think part of what happens with some of this information without presenting an alternative is it does become a black pill.
But isn't that a trap in and of itself? Like the first step in solving any problem is simply acknowledging we have one, and a lot of these people have yet to even acknowledge that. And so, so the problem becomes that we shouldn't need to have a solution to be able to start trying to find the solution.
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
Obviously agree with you because I spend all day, every day,
right,
presenting this information. Anybody who's seen my show knows that I have over 500 episodes covering this type of material.
Right.
So obviously I agree with you. You can't defeat a threat you don't know is there.
Right.
So I absolutely believe that is the first start. My concern though is for if we have this kind of situation where people do just turn against, Trump altogether, right? And now they turn against both, then what do we have? What are we left with? Are we left with some sort of violent uprising? Are we?
I would say we're left with the hard, cold reality. And this is the same thing we just talked about, right? So this is my perception.
Yeah.
As you well know, ladies and gentlemen, that I don't believe your vote translates to the outcome. So the point is we're stuck in this false cycle of pretending like we're having an effect on this, like the steering wheel on Maggie Simpson in the car and the, opening of the Simpsons. Like we literally are like, oh man, we got that guy in power, and so the problem is, until we can acknowledge that, we won't solve that problem. And so my mindset is, and to frame it correctly, from my perspective, I'm not saying turn against anybody. We just need to acknowledge the reality. And I don't believe that these people are fighting for the interest of what you think you're fighting for. And so if we can acknowledge that, turn in whatever direction you like, then we stand back and to address your question. And I get in this conversation all the time, like, okay, so you don't think our vote translates, and what else should I do? And I first and foremost will say, well, same point, I don't have all the answers to what you would later do. My first point would be, first, just don't take the same action that has no effect on the outcome. But there are other things we can try to do. I think voting is the least politically engaged aspect of our entire political system. But the point being, first, then what happens would be that we are then faced with the reality that this is our actual government. Like we don't have this effect. And so then we can see how they go forward without our engagement. And the point would be that, we're in a dark time already. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying that I would hope for that or that I want that to be the reality. I hope I'm wrong, in fact. But I don't see the positive side of going through the motions because there's no other option. Right. And we can have a whole conversation. Maybe we should sometime about what we would then do. Like what would be the alternatives, whether that's, action in the streets and all, whatever people want to propose. But I would still argue, no matter what, if the case is we argue your vote does not truly translate, simply go to that process because you don't have another option, I think is the worst decision. And I think that comes down to things like abstention, first and foremost, which is an actual voting option that they just don't let you have anymore, which would be an important step. To first
they do let you have that. You can abstain.
No, they don't tally it. It's not on any ballots. It doesn't actually count, right? So the point is
to vote abstention.
Yeah, I'm not saying just don't vote. That's not the same thing. Abstention isn't a vote, right? It goes back to the founding fathers. It goes back to the reality of actually going, I abstain as a public statement. It goes listed, it gets tallied, it gets presented on screen, 45 abstentions, right? And so the point is it can be either that you disagree with the outcome.
That's a motion of civil
in a sense.
Just civil dissent,
Yeah, right. And so it can be that you don't think that the presentation of the entire subject is even accurate, that you don't think the choices presented are the full picture, right? And so you go, no, I abstain because I don't want to, yes or no does not give you the right answer. And see, a lot of times in the UN, both the US or Russia will abstain and it gets framed the way the other side wants it to look. Really, like half the time, it's because they're like, look, what you're presenting is not the full picture. Exactly. So I'm not even going to engage. So I think that's the right way to look at that. But this is an important conversation. But I will always fall back on the idea that just going through a broken system where like the same old statement, the only way to win or not lose a rigged game is to not play. And that's it doesn't exactly encapsulate what we're talking about, but I think that's the first step,
Well, I think we should tease out that conversation. I'll just say in the quick form, though, I think that there is a very big difference. Like if there were an option for abstention, that is very different than just opting out.
Absolutely.
And I actually, that I'm much more open to because it is a public statement and it is still exerting the will of, your will. You're making a decision. You're not just defeating.
Right.
And I think that is a very different, that's just different than altogether backing out.
Doesn't it say a lot that we don't even, and I know you're well informed about what this is, right? But even bringing it up in this conversation that it's sort of like misconstrued as not even being involved. I think that's part of the illusion. I'll include this article I did about it a while back, Why Your Vote No Longer Counts, the True Power of Abstention. I always relate it to things like jury nullification. Like these are rights that have been taken from us.
Right.
You were supposed to be allowed as a jury to collect and go, you know what? We don't agree with anything even the judge is saying. We say, you know, and then you have the power to supersede the judge.
Right.
We don't. There was a whole important story where a guy was actually arrested on the sidewalk in front of a courtroom, on a public sidewalk. Part of it holding a sign that simply says, "Learn your rights about jury nullification," and he got arrested for it.
Wow.
Right. And you know, it's very interesting. But so I think that's super important. You know, just the understanding our different options. But so back to the actual conversation. I think it's really like right now we have this discussion with like Israeli people protesting the Israeli war, or like she mentions, just simply disagreeing with a foreign war. We saw that a lot during Iraq, Syria. The point now being with the people,
Vietnam.
Yeah, well, going far as you want to look, really. But right now we see this really aggressive reframing coming from the right. Where now the right is the one asking people to be censored, asking for them to be arrested, you know, because, well, they're promoting promoting terrorism or however they frame it. But so too were the people pushing back against the Iraq war. They called Nelson Mandela a terrorist when 2008 because they were the enemy of the current agenda. And this is always how it goes. So I think that's important to think about, is that it's just this flip-flopping narrative, and they're using, in my opinion, kind of like we just talked about, the right in a way to convince now you're all pushing for digital IDs or whatever it ends up being. It's good.
Well, they're working very hard through the right currently because I think they've had so much success through the left.
Yeah,
you know, and I know we talk about the left right being a false paradigm and it's a two-party illusion. However, there is, you know, the ideology. If we look at it from philosophical roots, and this is why I always say the dialectic progresses left. It always goes left. So they've had so much success in moving the spiral in that direction that now I think it's so important, and that shows you where we're at. I think that's a very good indicator of where things are at in the great scheme of things, is that they are feeling like they have to attack the right. They have to get the right on board, and I think this is part of why they're doing so many.
They isn't just the unelected power structure.
The parasite class, the powers that be. Powers that shouldn't be, you know, but I think that they've done a lot of splintering within the right. It's not that the left isn't being psyop, but I would argue the left has fallen for so many psyops already, and they've been really successul with those psyops. Right now, the target audience really is the right.
And it makes sense because I've said this many times. I mean, they're as even she framed it, the gun owners, the constitutionalists, you know, the people that believe in the foundational documentation.
So they created this
threatens,
honeypot, and those are the people they're going to go after.
Well, that too. But I mean, I would simply say that whether they come after you or not for the right things, believe in the right things. But I think that at the end of the day, it's what you're saying is that they're more of a threat. Like they were during, I said this during COVID-19 illusion, that obviously the most resistant to all these things were people that believe in the Constitution, believe in bodily autonomy. And then you just see the narratives flip, like we talked about, whether it's protesters or like I pointed out with the Second Amendment conversation. Suddenly the trans people, well, not them though. They do not, well, shall not be infringed is a pretty basic statement, you know? And so just, you can see them working their way into those ideologies. And I would argue that most people, like, not blindly at the top of the kind of team sport politics game, we're like, hold on, like I agree that those people are dangerous, but it's like they sense that there's a contradiction there. And I think that is why this has become so aggressive. I don't think it's working as much as they want it to. And I'm talking about specifically the conservative side of it. But I agree with you. I think it's because they are the most resistant to what overall seems to be happening. But that goes back to things like the SAVE Act that I argue was a Trojan horse for digital ID, right? And so same thing, just be aware, guys. I think they're trying to manipulate you for obvious reasons. I think that's why they try to frame them as the, whatever, the overlap with the Azov movement, the white supremacist Nazi threat of the Republicans. And that's why I think one of those pushes were, it's interesting.
I know people don't like the term, but there is an Overton window and they intentionally designed the Overton window. And so people get very trapped in that, the conversation that is the acceptable or the focus, the primal conversation of the time, when you need to really look at what is their end goal. And I mean, their end goal is, and she did lay this out, that she framed it very much within the, United States military apparatus. I would argue that this is and they've always done this. They've used the United States as the public front for it.
That's very much her opinion, though. The supranational entity.
Yeah, it's definitely a supranational entity. And I didn't see the whole.
Oh, yeah, just a clip plucked out of it. Yeah.
So just to, make that, for people to understand that in context, since that was out of context, this is very much a supranational and their goals, but they use the United States and they use the United States military apparatus as the frontman for this digital surveillance.
All the more the worry to have a deep state straddled leadership,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in any context, left or right, you know, because then you're being driven to the same thing. That's why I think my worry there, and that kind of all this back full circle, is Vance, Elon, Thiel, Adelson, all these different levels of influence that are like predominantly their funding right now. Like she pointed out, like Palantir being a CIA front. Palantir is the company that is doing all these surveillance on Americans, overlap with the whole big problem, and that is Thiel. And so, and they are the deep state. I mean, that'd be the best overlapping analogy to look at these intelligence apparatus, and even the right thinks that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what do we do about Facebook?
Well, I'm not, again, this isn't about like this right now is just trying to wake people up to the reality that I don't think what's being presented, that the whole rah, right, Trump Vance thing is very dangerous, because these people, just like last time, I said it then, Bolton, Pompeo, Barr, these were not the people that were draining the swamp, right? As I think Jimmy said on his show, his joke was that, you know, he drained the swamp and then found his cabinet at the bottom, right? And the point is they're the embodiment of the problem. And then we've gone back and everyone, but one by one, they became the enemy of Trump, right? So it's like, we're now back in the same position and the same thing's happening all over again. That's my worry. And yes, we should discuss solutions, but for crying out loud, the people that are going to be putting this person, whether perception or not, in power, they are the ones that need to lead this charge. And I think a lot of them are. I'm seeing a lot of conservatives stand up and go, timeout. Technocracy, World Economic Forum. You know, the problem is that the psyop around Twitter and Elon has been so powerful on the right that they're all blinded by that. That's, you know, and that's the whole point, is that Elon, that's what she pointed out, encryption and verification.
It's a data mining operation.
Exactly.
I said it over and over.
Yeah,
and over
no,
again.
you have. And that's the bigger problem, though, is it all feeds into each other. Now, again, I hope the point is that he'll be able to drive it away from that. But I think everything points in the wrong direction.
I'm hoping that he will, Trump, not, but again, I told you, I think part of the incentive for Vance makes it that much more likely that they will really try and succeed on an assassination on Trump, because if he has any potential to derail, even if it's just optics, I mean, let's just even go with that. Like, even if he has the optics of slowing down or being against some sort of a resistance, that alone has some sort of weight. And I think that Vance is going to be a great puppet for them. So, you know, and people are already on the quote unquote right, are already championing Vance for, you know, president. He's going to be the next one. I mean,
it's worrisome. And you have called this out, right? Like you said earlier, you talked about it in your group, and, you know,
I've talked about it online publicly, but I've talked about it privately, because, you know, you try to reach people however you can, you know, so much resistance.
Yeah, right. And, you know, it's funny that you'd be resistant to it. There's a lot of evidence to it, you know, I think people just don't want to shatter those illusions. And that's the hardest part with the way this all works. But let's talk about the overlap there, because the Trump assassination discussion, it's important in all this, which if what you're saying, you know, if this was, which I believe the evidence points to, a genuine assassination attempt, then clearly that, you know, assuming the point being that it was a missed attempt and not like a warning,
right?
Or even if it was, I guess, same point, that maybe that would be the next
step. Really
step.
hard to do a missed attempt. I'm sorry.
Well, it depends on how you think it actually went down. Trust me, I'm on your side in regard to the evidence. I'm being objective. There are people that still argue,
like, you know, trained marksman or anything, but like, to miss by that much, I'm sorry.
Well, it could be something that was involving him. I don't think that. I'm just saying there are other opinions out there where it gets, like you said, even the Q side of this and the Republican side, they've got all sorts of crazy narratives about how it was a blood packet and it was all fake. I think the evidence has been clearly the opposite, but there's a million questions. But let's get into it, at least some of the bigger points.
Sure.
But I just think that's important to think about, is that what she's saying is that it might end up being the fulfillment of what the attempt was, because Vance is like a picture perfect puppet to step in.
Yes.
That's concerning. That's concerning.
It's very concerning to me.
So let's actually first, since we had a good conversation about that at the start, we were going to talk about the CrowdStrike a little bit. So let's just rapidly.
Well, I think the CrowdStrike is very relevant.
It is. It is.
Okay.
No, go ahead. If you want, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I do see that as kind of like a signal, you know, a cyber polygon type of warning, a beta test perhaps. And I do think it's very relevant. I think that people need to pay attention to the possibility. You know, they tell us their plans, and Schwab, even though I think he's a front man, he's very much warned us about the cyber polygons, the EMP attacks that are possible. And I think that, you know, people who are thinking like, you know, they're not thinking, they're, you know, in their 15-minute cities, they're smart cities, they could really be completely locked into a digital prison, or locked out. I mean, that's the other possibility too. I think that they're, you know, also trying to push people who are, because they try to split. And so I think there are some people who are going like the off-grid kind of, and that those people will be completely locked out of society. There'll be no kind of interweaving.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously share the concerns about all those directions. Right now, I'm most worried again about how different variations of the narrative are driving a lot of the right to now some way support that, and that without knowing it, and that's the way this always works, right? The kind of the both. And so this is an important conversation because how it overlaps. But I was just going to highlight that that with CrowdStrike in the news due to global outages, remember that it's part of the Global Cyber Alliance, part of the WEF-led effort to force you to adopt digital IDs for internet access. Yep. And Whitney wrote this article for TLAV in 2021. That's this one here. You guys can read that, check it out. Ending Anonymity: Why the WEF's Partnership Against Cybercrime Threatens the Future of Privacy. Also wrote this one earlier than that. This one is in 2021, January. And this is interesting. This is another example of where CrowdStrike already came into play. Right. Another mega group says scandal or spy scandal. And it was like, I forget the pronunciation. Was it some Samanage with the company? It basically is a company that was used around solar winds. And ultimately, I'll just read the opening. It's kind of like a backdoor for Israeli intelligence kind of conversation. And CrowdStrike was used sort of like it was around the Clinton discussion. And it says the devastating hack on solar winds was quickly pinned on Russia by U.S. intelligence with the same old trappings of everything we've seen. A more likely culprit, Samanage, a company whose software was integrated into SolarWinds software, just as the back door was inserted, is deeply tied to Israeli intelligence and intelligence-linked families like the Maxwells. And this was where was it? Oh, I think it was just right here. I think I took it away. It's just simply saying such narratives clearly echo those that become prominent in the wake of the 2016 election, when now debunked claims were made that Russia hackers were responsible for leaked emails published in WikiLeaks. Parallels are obvious when one considers the SolarWinds quickly brought on the discredited CrowdStrike to aid them in securing their networks and investigating the hack. CrowdStrike had also been brought on by the DNC after the 2016 WikiLeaks publication, and subsequently it was central in developing the false declarations regarding the involvement of the Russian hackers in the event, which is very interesting. Now, I wanted to read what Harrison Smith, do you want to comment before I read this?
I'll just very quickly say that I was thinking about when, because Bill Barr has come up a couple of times. Donald Barr wrote a book called Space Relations.
Space Relations?
Yes. So you know the whole thing with how he was Epstein. He hired like college dropout Jeffrey Epstein to be the Dalton teacher for math and physics. And but then he goes on to work for like hedge fund managing, multi-millions. And Donald Barr wrote this book called Space Relations, and it's all about like aliens doing like a sex trafficking operation.
Interesting.
And the characters do seem very reminiscent of like Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein.
I think I've heard about that. Yeah. Right. And so it's like a cover story kind of thing for the book.
Crazy. Yeah. It's a crazy expensive book. I think it's like the soft cover is something like $500.
Interesting. Very weird. Yeah. Well, so this again, just in interest of getting to the discussion of the Trump assassination, I just kind of wanted to skim over this, which is interesting though. And this, just remembering the point is, and as he breaks this down here, this is the same entity that was used in the past. There's a lot of overlap right now. Like one comment about the Diebel machine, or the machines that are used for voting and so on. I think it's jumping the gun a little bit, but either way, I think this is a very concerning entity. And so let me see if I have the CrowdStrike story straight. He says, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she was illegally funneling sophisticated weapons through Libya to terrorists in the Middle East, which, by the way, left or right, is always what's going on in regard to the people they fund in their wars they're manipulating, or publicly doing so today. He says, in an effort to take out Assad in Syria for Israel, which again, regardless of paradigm, we've seen our government doing both these things to Syria, to, regime change and overthrows. When the weapons transfer went sideways and the U.S. ambassador was killed in Benghazi, it was discovered that she was using an illegal private server for secret communications. She destroyed the server, but not before its contents were leaked by WikiLeaks, including communications about bizarre occult rituals and inexplicable code words involving children and pizza. Instead of investigating the leak themselves, the FBI instead relied on a CrowdStrike investigation that falsely claimed the server was hacked by Russia. The FBI cleared Hillary Clinton, despite admitting she broke the law and launched the Russiagate investigation instead, using more fake Clinton campaign disinfo to tie Trump to Russia, to get a FISA warrant and spy on Trump while leaking dirt to the press to undermine first his campaign and his presidency, which, by the way, happened anyway. I still argue that there's more overlap there than we realize, it's my opinion. When Trump had a call with Zelensky and asked about CrowdStrike, a whistleblower falsely claimed quid pro quo. It's interesting to kind of tie these different events into that, because remember that was the time when they tried to accuse him of doing that and arguably trying to get information about that, but interesting overlap. And it says, and launched the first impeachment to stop Trump's inquiries. It was in the midst of his impeachment trial, by the way, when Event 201 took place. But that's another story. Fast forward to 2024, and Trump is dominating Biden when he miraculously survives a deep state orchestrated assassination. We'll talk about that in a second. 2 days before the RNC. 2 days later, CrowdStrike causes the biggest computer network crash in all of history, knocking millions of corporate and government systems offline for hours. Other than the fact that BlackRock owns CrowdStrike, and that's kind of a gross misrepresentation, but I think they're one of the highest investors, or rather own. We've talked about this in the past. Same thing with Rumble.
Right.
It's a stretch to say they own it, but it's a good point to make.
11%, I think it is.
But in either sense, they have the highest stake, right?
Sure.
But it to be accurate, but it says BlackRock affiliated investment firm placed millions of dollars betting against Donald Trump stock in Truth Social the hours before the assassination. Now that again was also something that has been later pulled back, but I'm equally suspicious about the error they said that it was.
I think so,
But to be accurate, that's the information they put out did show that it was a lot more than just his stock, but that could have been easily done to cover that, right? So it's nonetheless very, very conspicuous to happen the night before, obviously.
Very suspicious.
But I find this to be a good, kind of overview of it all. So I wanted to quickly play this because I think it's hilarious, kind of a fun note real quick before we get back into it. Remember, he's talking about the whole server thing and how they decided to investigate Russiagate instead of the server. I just thought this was a funny time to replay this clip that I think is just hilarious. And this was the Comey press conference about why they weren't going to go up, but ended up listing off all the crimes. They did a remix about it, if you remember.
Good morning. I'm here to give you an update on the FBI's investigation of Secretary Clinton. What I want to do is tell you what we're recommending. But first, let me tell you what we found. 110 emails in 52 email chains have been determined to contain classified information.
What difference at this point does it make?
8 of those chains are top secret, 36 of those chains secret, and 8 contain confidential information.
What difference at this point does it make?
Everything I did was admitted. There was no law, no regulation.
Secretary Clinton should have known that an unclassified.
I don't know why that is frozen. I guess that's just the audio. In any case, you guys get the point. The whole point is that that's Comey going through the list of all the things that they found, which are just shockingly criminal. And then they add in the whole thing. What difference does it make Clinton saying that? The bottom line was, it was just meant to be funny, but in play, of course, the point that it ended up being like embarrassingly obvious she broke the law, and they just decided not to charge her. Just a ridiculous reality. And then went on a witch hunt about Russiagate, which kind of was a two-pronged thing with QAnon that I think drove her right back to sleep in a lot of ways.
Right.
Very, very fascinating.
Yeah. I do remember it's Dana White. That's what I was talking about. Dana White.
What in
UFC? I think
yeah. You have the wrestling. Yeah. In regard to UFC. Yeah.
I blanked on the name.
And what was what was it again? What was his?
Oh, he was at the RNC. And he's very pro-Trump.
Oh, that's what somebody else was saying too about. That's now that it connects. That's why somebody was saying it's not wrestling, but they said a wrestling guy was the first to congratulate him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Kind of. He's always been a Trump supporter, so it's not like, oh, that's shocking.
Yeah,
there. It just kind of feeds into the whole Olympics or like football kind of.
Definitely.
And then I just saw that apparently Biden quit the race on National Ice Cream Day.
What? So I don't get it. So he can go eat more ice cream.
Well, they're always showing him and he's always like talking about his favorite ice cream flavor. So it's just kind of
more
funny.
Important to him. He got busy. He can't take on the presidency.
Too much ice cream. Yeah.
But so overview, we could talk a lot more on this in general. I want to make sure we talk about the Trump aspect of it. But the whole thing is, it's just, now there was a global outage for those who don't know. Airlines, banking stuff that appears to be back up today.
Yes.
Right. And so my thing was, I was yesterday, there's a lot going on. I wasn't able to get to a show, and I was like, maybe I just need to jump on and talk about this. And then I had the thought about it. I'm like, there's always these events, which I guarantee are going to be relevant in some way. I also think there was probably more to what that was yesterday.
Yeah.
but it's like, I hate the rush to say this was it, it's happening, you know, this is gonna, and then it goes right back, and now we're back in the same spot. And, you know, doesn't mean it wasn't nothing, but there's always a jump to cover the story from partisanship, always.
Right.
And I think that's important to highlight. But so overall, it's an entity. Oh, and the point I mentioned, by the way, is that I think it was Maricopa. Was that the county? Anyway, there's one of these counties somewhere had an issue with their election they were doing, and they weren't able, Maricopa, and they weren't able to. But the post. Oh, I think I might even have grabbed it. Was this it? Let me see. No. But in any case, the point was that basically they said that because of the outages, they had to postpone something or other. But as far as I could tell, I didn't dive incredibly deep, but it wasn't. The argument now has become online that their CrowdStrike is hosting the servers of these voting machines. And I'm like, well, first, the claim is that they're not even connected to the internet, which I believe is probably not accurate. I think they're lying about that in a lot of ways. But what to use this to make that point, it's simply, I don't know whether that's why they postponed it or so on. I just, same kind of idea. There's a lot of speculation that gets projected as, you know, the reality. And so, and this ties into the other point I was going to make. Overall, let's keep an eye on what's going on with the CrowdStrike thing. Nobody should be okay with that company being involved with anything like this. That's obvious no matter what side you're on. Right? Absolutely. And that's the problem, is these companies work their way in, like Whitney was talking about, to become like these central players that are tied to the worst people, the worst manipulations, and we always get played by it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I also think it's very concerning with the airlines, because there's just a massive push from every angle to stop us from flying. They do not want the plebs to have any access to transportation. And
well, that's the larger point to make to the end there is too, that this clearly, as you made in the beginning, overlaps with the idea of the cyber pandemic and the idea that they're telling you it's going to come and everything's going to collapse. And what does that lead to, you ask? Reimagining our future, because see, we're vulnerable, and that's like a easy 1, 2 step, 1, 2, 3 problem
Remaking the
solution.
world in the age of global enlightenment.
Yep, there you go. Right, it all connects, and they're clearly pushing that. Right, I mean, every time something like this happens, they're always saying we need to get more control over this, and that goes back to the public-private partnership, and with what things like Palantir and Thiel and all these same players. So it all interconnects, and I wanted to include this part of it, which goes to that same point, which is really interesting to me. So let's go at this without, this was posted July 19th. First day at CrowdStrike, pushed a little update and taken the afternoon off. Look at him in front of CrowdStrike, clearly, right? And then he goes, fired, totally unfair, on the 19th. Then he follows up with this video on the 19th saying, what happened was completely my fault. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Hello, it was indeed definitely, absolutely, certainly me who did the CrowdStrike modification that caused all this worldwide. It was my very first day on the job as a new system admin dev, and I was very eager and excited. Let's say I actually made a small update to a line of code to optimize and update slightly, a little bit, and maybe I shouldn't have. I got fired, so I was called in. Normally I only worked in the morning. Well, I worked in the morning, did a small update, and then went home. And then they called me back today, indeed telling me that I really need to come back. It really wasn't even to congratulate me. I thought it was as if it was. So now I'm just waiting for my termination documentation. They told me that you should never put an update into production without testing it, especially not on a Friday. And I said, well, it's not Friday, it was Thursday. Today is Friday. But you see, I had tested the update on my PC and it was working.
Okay, so he posted that on the 19th, hashtag CrowdStrike. Then he says, hello, Elon, do you have a job for me? Please retweet so Elon can see it. Then he says, a lot of people are mocking my hand. It's an optical illusion. It's normal size. He's just putting all these plays out. And he goes, a lot of you asked the line of code I changed to optimize. Here it is. And at this point, he's going crazy.
Right.
This is going around and back, shared aggressively by a lot of really large Republican platforms, most of which have now deleted this. And he says, look, The Simpsons predicted it. Crown style. And then goes, how I broke the internet today and what lessons we can learn from it. Listen up.
Today's tweet where I said I work at CrowdStrike has been seen tens of millions of times on Twitter, shared on all possible social media, front page of Reddit, Imgur. Honestly, I see it absolutely everywhere. It's just completely crazy. And in fact, to the point where obviously when something like this manages to be so widely spread, no matter how many denials there are, people will continue to believe it, and it's kind of like an urban legend. And what's really funny is that I generated, you can see in the photo that I have a kind of horn. It's because I did a really bad Photoshop edit. And here's the original photo. I was with some teachers in a training session on fake news specifically. And so I needed a hand doing that, so I asked Photoshop's generative AI to do it. And that's why I have a tiny comic book hand. And so it's very funny because I already see people sharing the thing on the other side of the world. It's like the Japanese saying, yeah, the thing is, it was a guy who was on his first day at the company who messed everything up. And on top of that, he had comic book hand. So not only does it teach people to verify their information, it also shows them a bit of what can be done with videos created by generative AI. And there you go. It's quite funny. I got fired, so I was called in. Normally I...
So the obvious point, right? So I no way am I in suggesting anything about censorship or anything like that, which is probably his fake news class would be loving talking about, right? Everybody has a right to share anything they want and so on. It's the same point I made about past discussions, that it's crazy to me how many people out there jump at these things without any due diligence.
Right.
And I'm talking like very high level. There was corporate overlaps in this. There were people in corporate media who were sharing this out. I mean, some of which were like, I don't know about this, but they were still sharing it. And to bring it back up, this went, check this out. Just this one has 45 million views, right? And so obviously there is a point to be made about people and fake news, not to suggest that that in any way, in my opinion, means that anybody should be censored. That's free speech. But we need to start learning that especially people in the paradigm are manipulating your ability to blindly believe what the side says or what the gospel, the ideologue says.
The other thing I think that's really like this is really a statement to is that we live in, it's like people are being rewarded for having, access to the information. And that's how the algorithms are, that's how they work. And so people are so hungry that's why they call things way before they have any information.
Right.
And so I think it's very dangerous.
It is. And it's getting taken advantage of by
really getting
the deep state, the government, both sides of the paradigm.
Yeah. There's so much pressure to have to be first, to have something groundbreaking. And I think just because of technology, the access to stage it is much higher. So people, I keep saying we're going to have reality wars, and I mean that literally.
Absolutely.
People are going to be arguing over what's real, what's not. It's like
that we need to have a conversation about. But we're stepping into this right now. I can only imagine where with this part of it, I bet you even that if we flushed it out would be so abstract for some people.
Yeah.
Because we're in the earliest stages. I know exactly what you're talking about. We're going to get to this point where we're literally debating about not just what the video was or who the person was, but entire reality.
Really happened.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the deep fake overlap.
Yep.
That creeps me out. That's a part of the world where, I mean, there's just no, you know what I relate it to? It's sort of like I say about people that are arguing from a position of God told me to do it. There's just there's no discussion to be had.
Right.
You can't say you're wrong. They'll be like, no, I know, I'm right. And there's nothing you can do. And so you just agree to disagree. What happens if that's nation states or, that's where this is going, and it's intentional, I think. But
I think it's absolutely intentional. Yeah. So this is very, very concerning because this really it puts it up on big stage for you to see where we're going, where we're headed.
And as Annie showed you, this is the original post, and you can clearly see how bad that was. I mean, how do you not notice that? You know what I mean? I mean, or at least take a second to look at it to make sure he says so, you share it, and this actually happened, by the way, recently. Actually, funny enough, we'll talk about this next. Where was this? I think it was this one here. So this video went around showing people claiming it was Trump's ear getting shot. And it's utterly fake. And it takes half a second because now this is added. He's facing the wrong way. The hat language is backward. The writing, somebody inverted this. And apparently at first I thought it was not even the right location, but I guess you can find her on the other side, behind the little podium thing or the teleprompter. So they just inverted it and they altered it to make it look like his ear was shot. This got shared by everybody. Somebody, I think Luke Rudowski and people were sharing this, look, we got it. And I'm just going that's your point. They were so quick to jump at it that we don't even take half a second to look at one of the most obvious fakes I've ever seen and how dangerous that is. And everybody should learn from that lesson because it's irresponsible, and do they have a right to do it? Being wrong, lying? Yes, that's free speech.
They have a right to do it, but I think that
that's important to say. They do, but they're wrong in doing so.
But the commentary, well, I think, the interesting point to me is the pressure that people feel, the need. So prior to this type of technology, journalists always felt the pressure to be first, to get the story. You got to get the story. But now with technology, so I talked about a while ago, I was talking about AI and ethical wars, like the ethics behind AI. And
That's
I think
also
it's
very important
really, I think this really, points to that, because it's this idea of, you always want, journalists always want to get the story. They want to get the groundbreaking and be the first. But now they can create it. They can manufacture it, whether it's real or not, but they're going to get rewarded because they get the likes, the clicks, the shares.
And that's what he said too, is that that's the best point about this. I'm glad you said that. His point is that no matter how many people step in and go, no, it was fake. No, it wasn't. I saw it, it become like he said, an urban legend that's gone the world around. And so now it's just in talking points. It's like you get people like Nikki Haley still saying that Assad gashed these children, or these narratives that have been so utterly debunked because it's just stuck in the conversation. Same thing. This will be probably or they'll end up coming around the other side and saying, no, the second part of the story was the fake. That's trying to hide the reality because that's what they've ingrained into their narrative. It's everywhere.
And either way, now he's got a platform.
Exactly. So he benefits either way, even if it was meant to be a lie. That's
and so I think that the ethics is a real question. This like so many people are using AI to write like articles and books even, and people will say, well, you're not really plagiarizing because now you're just not plagiarizing from one person, it's from a collection throughout the internet, right? But it does become this, I think it's going to shift what people perceive as being ethical. There's going to be, right, if you don't have any qualms about stealing from and plagiarizing from the internet essentially, and you don't, but you're claiming it as yours, right? You're taking some sort of ownership, or you're capitalizing on it, you're profiting off of it. The same thing, this guy's completely staged, it's completely fake. But when this becomes part of the common usage and commonplace in general, like then where people's ethical borders are going to be. It shifts it, I think.
There's been many comments. The one I always highlight, there's many of them, is Eric Schmidt in a podcast years ago saying that, eventually we're going to get to a point where artificial intelligence is making policy decisions that we may fundamentally think are immoral, but they know better. It will know better, and we have to act. I'm like, holy shit, did he just say that? Like,
the
very
AI
much so.
World Society literally lays out how all human governments are going to be supplanted by AI. So they're going to make all of our policies,
assuming it even is AI, not just one of them behind the computer.
Well, this is what I would say about the post-humanists. There's the transhumanists, and then there's the literal post-humanists. How do these people think that they're going to have programs for AI? Who's programming them? We don't have humans. It's all robotic.
Well, that's kind of the whole horror movie reality when it becomes a circular where AI is training itself and it's like exponential and we're done.
If you even believe that that's really possible.
Good point. And I think that's up for debate right now. Has been.
I don't see any evidence for sentience, but I think that, it's very dangerous either way, because even if there isn't sentience and you convince the mass populace that sentience is possible, the result will be almost the same.
Like a deity, it'll be God, right? That'll be the same ideas. They'll look at it.
Even just if people believe that there's sentience, even if it's not, the result will be almost the same. Because they're
exactly. And I guarantee they know that. Right. And so it could be a whole like moon conversation, like where they're like, well, let's just get out ahead of it. Let's just tell them we did it and we'll make it happen in the background.
Exactly.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh. That's actually really terrifying.
Yes, it's terrifying.
Man. But I think this was an excellent point to demonstrate how easy it is for like what you're talking about, people like that. This is a very good argument for why I think, the way that we present what we do, it's not about being first, it's about being correct, right? It's like, I think that the world is, and I'll even argue that it's possible that I'm being very naive, right? That the world is designed in a way, maybe not necessarily that we want it this way, but it just is, by simply thinking you can just step into it and be objective and honest and accurate, and that will speak for itself. And you don't need the gimmicks and the marketing and all the rest of it, and that will just work. And that's what to a degree, I think I've proven that. I think we've proven that, right? But at the same time, not, because it's like you get stuck and you just, everything builds around it. And, but I'd like to believe that it's about trying to set that, like the Milgram experiment that Corbett's talked about, be the first one to go, you know what? fuck that. No,
No.
We're not going to do that. We're going to stand out alone, and then one more person go, yeah, I want to be like that. I that's respect. And so eventually it builds. And that's what I think we're trying to do in the media. Not to say that we're even the starting point, but just I see, like, for example, Corbett is somebody who's inspired me to be that way. And I think that that's how that works. So I do believe that if we continue to step into this field with integrity and only seek out the truth at all costs, even if we're not the first, then eventually we can change this field. And I think that's happening. Now,
I like that. I think that this time you might be a little more optimistic than I am.
Yeah. Wishful thinking is a good thing sometimes.
Sometimes. It is how I live. Like I'm just not somebody who can ride a grift for the sake of it, or that just it doesn't sit well with me. And I feel like I get like this internal kind of, no matter what kind of external, reward I might get, like the internal cost that I pay is too great. And I'm just not capable of it.
Right.
So I hope that, that sets as an example, and that there are enough of us that do that does, perpetuate some sort of change.
I see it. I can't speak to whether I think it will actually change the dynamic, but I mean, I see it. I see more and more people stepping up and recognizing that. Maybe it's not because of people like us at all, or just simply that they also were like, this has gotten so obvious that I'm just tired of playing these games. I just want to be, the problem is that people step into this as a new entity. It's immediately clear that you will not benefit from that.
Right.
You tap into something, whether it's one narrative or another, one side or another, and you see a very quick response from that. And so it's a feedback loop. It's dangerous, and so that's where this all leads to, So on that very note, let's talk about the discussion of Donald Trump.
All right.
And the attempted assassination. And I think it's rife with just about everything. I mean, this has got to be one of the most fascinating incidences like this, because we can see, like we were talking about before, but within like the right alone, there's like 4 different perspectives that challenge each other, but at the same time also all come together at the end in regard to Trump being the positive thing. And then on the other side of it, the same thing. You got the left, they're like totally staged, when 30 seconds ago they would have called that irresponsible in any way to even suggest that they could fake an event, or it's I don't know, I'm entertained in a weird way.
I thought you can't say it's fake. I mean,
right, you're not allowed to challenge serious violent events, right? Isn't that
didn't Alex Jones have to pay millions of dollars for claiming that?
Absolutely. And here's even a funnier way to go one step in the other way again, is that I've now seen a lot, this crazy push. I just talked about libs of TikTok doing this, of the right now canceling people because they're saying something about Trump. Or I think it was Robbie Starbuck quoted somebody saying, I wish they would have shot better, which is disgusting. It's a human life, right? But we've seen a lot of those jokes, people joking about the, Black Lives Matter, or people that like all these different aspects of people on the right doing the same thing. But my point is, or like, I think it was James Woods who made a point about somebody who should have killed himself better or whatever. Oh, it was Aaron Bushnell or something like that, right? And there was a lot of those. And so the point is that he came out and said, oh, Alex Jones had to pay for this, so he should have to pay. And did you really just say that? So do the same thing that I just spent last year telling you shouldn't be happening because it's unjust, but do it to them because they're the other side. Yes, guys. Yes. And that's how that works.
Well, this is my whole point about Project 2025, right? It's like, just because it's what you want to see doesn't mean that it's right.
Totally.
You still have to follow what is the, process, like it's constitutional, if it's ethical.
Always. Right.
Really,
and that's
constitutional is really the,
Yeah. And there are a lot of people out there, both in the paradigm and not, that do believe that, but my point is to see those that are willing to compromise what they just got done telling you was never, like I made this point about libs of TikTok in regard to the canceling part of it. Now, people that are out there saying that, like, I think the comment was something like, oh, I wish he was a better shot. You have every right to go out and say, you're disgusting. You're the human life, no matter what you think about him, and you're a bad person. But the point was not about whether she had a right to say it or whether or not libs had a right to call her out. It's about the fact that they tagged Home Depot and was like, fire that person, and then cheered it on. And this is one of like 40 people. I mean, I've seen at least 5 of them, but apparently a huge campaign where they're getting people fired for, in some cases, just really bad jokes. You know what I mean? And it's like that, but it's so shockingly hypocritical to do the same thing in cancel culture, regardless of how justified you may feel. You don't think the people on the left, in some cases, thought they were justified in shutting down what they thought were Nazis or whatever else, and how deluded they are? It's just same point we just made. Just be better, right? Strive for the things you actually believe in and don't compromise, because I made the point about foreign policy. Oh, well, Russia used cluster bombs, so let's give cluster bombs to Ukraine because aren't they illegal? Yeah, but they did it first. Like, oh, so you're not the thing you say you are.
Make it right.
I got it. So you're just as bad as they are. I get it. I get it.
Yep.
All right, so let's get into this conversation. I'll include the shows I recently did.
Okay.
The one about just the first one, second one, third one about just evidence going forward. Now I wanted to start here. Really, before we can get into this, where do you want to start on this? Anything that jumps into your mind about this discussion stands out? Because I've been breaking this down, and I've kind of in my mind about the parts that I think are worthy of calling out. But anything to you that stands out?
No, we can go through whatever you have. I mean, I for me, it's just that there's a lot that we don't know,
Right.
but everything really just point to it being legitimately an assassination attempt.
Mhm.
And so at this point, I'm kind of, I don't know. So the people who are claiming that it's not, it just,
Well, let's just for sake of conversation. I mean, I'll insert that where I think it's a relevant, different opinion. But just aside from that, like, what are your thoughts on I would argue the possible viable, like a second shooter, that he was a patsy and somebody else. And like, what do you think about all those things?
MK Ultra victim.
Yeah,
I totally do. He meets all of the markers
Mhm.
of MK Ultra. But that would also fall in line with a deep state kind of operative.
Yeah.
I think it's totally possible. I think it's likely there was another shooter.
Mhm.
I've seen some of it like from the angles. It would be likely that from where I think there was like a window that was open, that would have had a more
from the building,
Yeah.
or the water tower. Or there's a lot of different
or the water
possible
tower.
theories.
Yeah, would have been more likely to have hit Trump where it did, if it was another shooter. So I mean, I'm open to all of those. I haven't seen enough of the evidence to
Right.
make a claim that's definitive in that regard. But that's
Yeah, I think the point is that there's a lot of reason to be very skeptical, and I'm not from a whatever you want to call it. It's obviously an objective stance right now to go timeout. Like the way that went, the way the Secret Service acted, the angles you're presenting. There's a lot of anomalies in this that just
wasn't there even like an article that it wasn't even Secret Service?
Well, now we're getting to the overlap. The story's been changing over the last couple of days. At first, Cheadle was like, well, I gave them the responsibility of the building, and then they came out and said, well, technically, no, we only had parking. And then at the point being today is that, well, according to the Secret Service, they're not even legally allowed to outsource their responsibility.
Right.
And so it's just like she has buried herself with these different statements that kind of contradict what really happened. And so the point is, why? Now, you could easily go, because this, in my theory, and it's certainly possible, but I think what we know is that she's clearly been inconsistent with her story. There's been dishonesty in there. And it could easily amount to just her trying to cover her ass. That's possible, but I'm with you. I think there's a lot of weirdness there. And, the aspect of, like, for example, what was the other point I was going to say? Like, the angles in general, which I'm going to get into first, is one of the things that just I can't get past. And it could just as likely be another shooter that would answer that question.
Yep.
But I just don't like boxing out possibilities, because people will say, as we already talked about, there's a lot of theories flying around. So let's
I think it is likely there was another shooter, but
let's start with this in general. So this is the thing that really stands out to me. And what I was going to show is that it's interesting that I've been talking about this, and I'll go right to what you were saying. This was what you were talking about on the angles and so on.
Yeah.
That's the water tower side of it. There is, which I'm going to start with, a big discrepancy around where he was on this building. And I'm going to show you my thought on it. I'd like to get your take on it. And I'm all very open to the different theories. All I've been trying to do the entire time was break down what we can see, what we can prove, and asking, like, how does that add up?
Right.
And I'll show you what I mean. And people have argued that it's like a perspective thing that might have changed it, and we'll get into where he might be. But the big difference is whether he was over here or over here, or maybe somewhere in the middle. And each one of those very much changes the angle, right?
Very much.
But overall, the same point John Cullen is now making, which I've been kind of screaming about from day one, is that I don't think wherever he was on this roof, that he would have had a shot at Trump's back right ear while he was looking here, which is where the Jumbotron was. And I'll show you a better shot of that. And that's the same point he's making. And so I think what's interesting, and you can see this shot too, where this was corporate media. There's now 3 corporate media platforms that put him on this part of the roof. The far, I guess, if you're looking to this gets so confusing. If Trump's facing forward on the stage and looking to his right, the point is on that building, he would be all the way to the left. But if you're standing behind the building looking at Trump, he would be all the way to the right of that building. Either way, the point is where you can see him on the screen is where I think it seems like he was more likely than the other side, right? But the problem is that this has been moved by even corporate media many different times, and it hasn't really been fleshed out. And there's also more than one sniper location. I'm going to get into that in a second as well. So here, let's just play his thoughts on this first. And this is Teachers for Choice. I'm going to be doing a space with coming up, I think, next couple of days, breaking down my this was Jason Bassler did our clip of this on Instagram for us. Oops. talking about the same overlap. And you kind of see the same, like that's a corporate media image right there, showing it from right there. So here's what John Colon was saying, and it's generally the same point I'm making, that no matter where he was in that building, I argue he wouldn't have been able to shoot that part of his ear, which could mean fake if you want, or it could be another shooter, right? Or some other variation. His point is acknowledging what we can see.
Take a look at that chart. Take a look at the arrow on the bottom. See the big red arrow, right? So that's what I left off.
What is he gesturing at and glancing at? What's he pointing at?
He's pointing at the Jumbotron.
He's pointing at the Jumbotron, and he keeps glancing at the Jumbotron.
See the big red?
He's glancing at the Jumbotron. He's pointing at it. He's glancing at it. All right? It's important that you remember this and this angle. If, in fact, he is glancing at that Jumbotron at the moment he is shot, there is no way that Crooks hits him in the right ear.
Now, I think that's very easy to see. And the point when he even puts him all the way, which is interesting, he's got, so on this angle, he's got him kind of more like right there. If you can see that building over there to the left, that is where they have him placed like after he was killed. And I'll show you that image I'll show you in a second. It's very anomalous because the gun is way too far away from him.
Right.
And that's supposed to be before anybody went up there. And so it's like, well, how did that happen? Did he throw it when he was, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
So I think I argue if it's placed in the wrong spot, that the body was moved. That's not, I'm not saying I can prove that. I'm just thinking if you're trying to just make sense of how it would be in a different spot, that would seem to make sense. But then he shows you the angle over here,
right ear,
which shows it further, I would argue, to that right. But my point is, no matter where he was, I agree with John on this, that it just, so there's the Jumbotron. He's looking directly at it, gesturing at it. And even at the last point, the whole argument is he tilts even further. You can see that's the whole argument they made that like saved his life, that he tilted and went. But I just don't see how that's possible. Now, maybe you get some kind of breakdown. I'm open to the possibility that I'm wrong. I think that's pretty objective.
Crooks would have hit him in the left side of the head. If he's glancing at the Jumbotron, Crooks hits him in the left temple, and the president is dead.
Yep, I see it.
If he's looking at the Jumbotron, what is directly behind the Jumbotron?
Water tower is where he's going with that.
The top of the water tower.
Now, I don't know about this part of it. Not to say that that's not possible, but what they're presenting as what they think they see as a person. I mean, it's not even worth. It just could be sun reflection. It could be anything. And it also could be a person. I think the logical lineup of the tower does make sense with a lot of the angles. I'll show again in a second. But I'm just not quick to jump at this. I've shown one on the show, which I'm like, it just looks like a black variation. And like this, the sun looks on the top of a hot surface. It's really, and the trees moving.
Like a shadow.
Yeah, I'm just like, God, it's just really hard to tell. Certainly could be the case.
This gets very awkward because we've got footage that shows something shadowy moving around potentially on top of the water tower.
Not very sound, potentially moving, but I agree though. It does, watch the video. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, by the way, I would just want to pat myself on the back here that this was something I picked up on day one. It was like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up to me. And I got so much pushback on this. And I still think that it's sound. I've doubled down on every other show since then. It's just funny. And again, I certainly could be wrong, but nobody has come up with an argument that's like, you're wrong. They just disagree. And I'm like, well, but look at the angle. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And then we get fakes coming out showing the ear shot. And I'm like, this is starting to feel a little bit fishy to me. And again, that could add up, like you're saying, to be a deep state attack on his life. And they missed and they're trying to cover it up, or that it was a warning, or, who knows? But we have to acknowledge that just something doesn't line up to me, And then, that was it right there. And then, so here's what I think is interesting. This is where I'm coming from. So this is a video. Let's go back to the quick shot here from the right side of the building. That's clear. This has been shown in 40 different ways. And I think that even one of these has the lineup. Maybe not. I've tried to grab from the other shows, but so the point is, here's where the kind of like people's party is all like right over here. Okay. And that's what we're looking at. So you get this video shot, and this is the bottom is the active part. The top is just showing you the one shot they got where you show him. So here's what we can prove. He's on the slanted upward side of the roof, right? He's facing toward Trump. That's what we know. That's what everyone's telling us, right? I shouldn't say no. It's what we're being told, right? And then you see in the video, which I'll play next, the guy's looking at him, and you can see that he's in the grass. You can also see the window on that side of the building. Oh, it's not. Oh, whoops. Oh, that's why. I forgot I re-downloaded that. Let me just play it right here.
Okay.
Oh man, that's the wrong one. Well, it suits the same purposes. So you already saw the one I just showed you. You can see his, let me just grab this really quickly.
Okay.
Sometimes what I do is I download these under numbers and I forget that it changes the one I had from before. Here's the angle shot, just so you can see that. Okay. I just want to be able to see that again. Okay, so then my point is, in this video, you can see where they're coming from. So there he is, but this is after he was shot. So he's on that roof, it's facing upward. You can see you can see the window on the building right there. See what I'm saying right there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you can see the grass. They're standing in the grass. Like, this is the whole conversation. So what I'm saying is, if you go back to this part of it, how in the world, this is the better one, how do you get a shot of him? Trying to get the right spot. Sorry. Here we go. How do you get a shot of him upward slanting on the roof, not down, from that side of the building like that if he's all the way on the left side, which is where the parking lot was?
Right.
Now, there very, very well may be an answer for that. Somebody's saying that they were on an elevated area. But look, my opinion would be simply the same as, I don't see how you get that shot. Look at how close you can see. He's right there. He's not on the other side of that building.
Right.
That's a long building, right? And
Yeah.
this just doesn't make any sense to me. And so then we come back to the point is that he clearly seems to be at least further to the right, if not in the middle, if that's even possible with that shot. That's it for you guys to decide. But I still think that's really interesting. At the end of the day, the lineup would make that even more impossible. Going back to this, right? So if he's all the way there and he's looking all the way to the right, I mean, that's just nearly impossible in my opinion, let alone the back upper right of his ear, right? It just doesn't line up for me. So if you jump in at any point, I'm just going to, I just find this very interesting that shows you a discrepancy that I can't get past. You have any thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, I agree with everything you pointed out. I've been saying I think it's likely that there was another shooter, but I can't prove that. I just don't know.
Here's the one I was trying to play. Just
Go ahead. I was just going to say, from the beginning, this kind of looked very reminiscent of JFK, and only it was not successful. I recently had Jerome Corsi and Dr. Maddock on the show to talk about their book. And he goes through, very, very thorough kind of evidence indicating that there were multiple shooters. And I feel like that's probably
it would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would add up. And so then let's play this out for a second before I play this. So if you're talking, so if we have let's just say this, if we think that this is not, if he's on a side or a placement, which I think arguably would be anywhere in that building, that he wouldn't be able to hit the ear, that could either mean another shooter and he would be a patsy in the whole thing, right? Or I guess you could argue it was fake, which I don't think the evidence points to, right? Is there anything else you could think of that would make that make sense?
There's also the possibility that maybe, he missed completely, but
there's that theory that I don't think it's this, but early report from local media reported that they hit the glass teleprompter and that it shattered in his ear, which the only reason I thought that made sense is because I still don't think that the cut, or it just doesn't look like you would expect. I knew I was going to bring them up. I have the images. I just didn't grab them. But the shots on his ear, they just don't, it doesn't look, I can't really see a spot, especially if a bullet hit it. But again, it could be, there's a couple shots you see, one with like the hair in the way, which kind of makes it look like there might be a divot. But then there's another angle where I swear it looks like you can see the full ear with blood on it. But again, it could be angles, could be lighting.
Pretty clear divot.
Yeah.
Like circular divot.
Well, there are those shots going around where you can see like the altered images, right? But from what I can see, let me just grab them so we can talk about it. Because there's some interesting shots. Here's one of them, I think. Get that back up. So there, to me, it looks quite different than the other one. I have a better shot and better resolution, but it just doesn't look like I don't see like what you would expect, a bullet hole.
It looks like a hole to me.
It could. No, it definitely could. But the other argument people make around this is that there's, very little blood on his white shirt at all and all these different things. But I did show a picture of one of the Secret Service sort of wiping him with a rag. Right. So that would make sense. Let me grab this other shot. It's much more clear, I think. If I still have it, I deleted it. Oh, well, in any case, it's more speculation, which, but I still thought it was an interesting one. Yeah, it doesn't look like I have it right here. Oh, well. But anyway.
Whether or not it was Crooks who was successful, or missed but hit him,
Mhm.
or whether he was a patsy just to stage and deflect, and there was another shooter, which I think is actually more probable. But either way, that indicates that points to Crook being a patsy who was
Mhm.
MK Ultra'd
Yeah.
and staged.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so back to this video. So let me show you what I was saying. The important things in this again, this, I guess TMZ put this out. The top is just showing you the still shot of what they catch in the video, where you can see him. But the point is here that this guy, and this is a different point, but it's also relevant. So one, like we were just talking about, look at where he is, look at the grass you can see. The point, though, on top of this is that they time this where they're watching this guy. Also, there's 3 points technically. They're all screaming. There's a guy with a gun and nobody's doing anything, right?
Yeah.
But so they're watching him enough time to film all this. Yeah, people see it from in the crowd in front of Trump. They're yelling it, right? It's like it's no way. But so the point is that he's watching with this camera. You hear the first series of shots, pop, pop, pop. They come off, and then you hear the next few. So at that point, we're supposed to think that he was shot, right? Then you hear this guy go, he's turning towards us, which would not be happening, right? And then you hear one last pop, and they go, oh, they got him. You hear everyone say that. And the point is, they heard them talk. The guy that did the first interview, they said they watched his head get shot, right? So how does that add up with the rest of the story? Because that would mean to me that there was at least 8 or 9 shots, depending on if it's an echo, and then one last random shot that came way after the fact. That doesn't add up with any of the other narratives we're getting from the Secret Service or anything.
No, but it is entirely possible that he shot and it didn't land, right? That's
what the shooter with the other shooter. Yeah, no, most definitely.
Yeah.
I just mean that all I'm saying with that point is that the time when the shot, and they could be wrong in what they're seeing,
right,
but that they saw him get shot with the very last shot you hear. That's all I'm saying. That's not what we're told from the sniper team, which we'll actually look at a mainstream article about it next, where they're claiming that it was a 1 in a million shot, and they show you the guys who supposedly shot him, and I'll show you the way they reacted in the beginning, which is the very first shot. So how does that line up? I'll show you what I mean, but let's watch this first. There he is. Take a shot. Okay. A few more. There's the window.
Hope he's turning this way.
Okay, so after the first series of shots, he's turning towards us.
Careful, guys.
Listen. Okay. Last shot. He's down. He's down. His toes come down more than he was before, right? Yeah, it's blurred out kind of now. I don't know why. That's pretty much it. They just start cussing more and stuff. But the point is, it just stays right there. So I think the timing of the shots is important, and I'll show you what I mean. Before we get to that, though, again, just the overarching point that I think it's interesting, the angles of all of this, right? So how does that make sense if you can see him from that side? So I just want to make sure plan that in people's minds, and there may be an answer to that. Because look, here's the shot of where he ended up. Look at the gun. Look how far away that is from him.
So far away.
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And I can't place where he is in this shot, but that shot generally, the larger one from up top, shows him on all the way on the side of the parking lot.
Right.
I challenge you to explain to me how that shot's possible from that, no matter what perspective you're at on the upsloping roof. And on top of that, even, that was on the. So the slope is correct.
Yeah.
The angle's correct. The placement on that roof doesn't add up for me. Very strange. Again, the other point being the shot and the angle, and then the people that were shot. So there was somebody in this shot and 2 people over here. Did
he then throw the gun before he?
Certainly possible, I guess. And he threw it in the air, but I just don't think that is what would normally happen. You get shot, it's an immediate, especially in the brain. It's nothing. It's done before you can even react.
And even with you could argue that maybe it rolled, but with the
not with that spot,
the rigid in the roof, it wouldn't be likely.
Not rolled there, at least. It just doesn't make any sense. So I'm arguing, unless there's something that changes the other view, that he simply got moved for some reason. But then wouldn't there be people that would see that? That's my point. So much about this is anomalous. It doesn't really seem to add up. And they've done less than I've ever seen an event like this. Usually we get the exact opposite. They rush out with a narrative, which they did, but days later. But usually it's immediate. Here's what happened.
They rushed out with 7, so many narratives. Weren't there 7 suspected shooters initially?
Yeah, but I mean from the corporate media side of it, right? Where they usually come out with the kind of here's what you're supposed to think about this story, and then they maybe change it later. Now it's been like they haven't even really gotten into the nuance of it, which they almost always do. That just is an anomaly to me. Like that seems to suggest that there might be more going on, like all the rest of the things seem to point to.
I think they want people confused.
I agree.
I
agree.
think that's part of why there were 7 suspects.
And you can see that the water tower would line up more, at least with those shots. So you could argue maybe that there was multiple involvement, you know, that he did shoot his ear and somebody else shot those people. I don't know, but I still find it interesting. So did the sniper part, right? So even the corporate media was only seeming to tell you that there was one sniper group. There was 2 on Trump's side, which is definitive at this point. We already talked about the fake video of his ear, which I mean really does add for me. People like this who are gigantic platforms are just not checking and sharing it. I find that very suspicious. So here's the article that came out on the 19th of July. Sniper killed would-be Trump assassin with 1 in a million shot. Now, is it really a 1 in a million shot? It's not actually that far away. And on top of that, I mean, it might be if they were behind the tree, and that's not where I think he was. So maybe we're seeing the narrative presented that's actually contrary to the facts. But the point would be that's kind of the way they frame this, is they say the shot that killed the man who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump at the rally last Saturday was a 1 in a million shot. He says that they learned from the source the kill shot was a single shot taken by the Secret Service counter sniper whose view was obscured. Now, it wouldn't have been obscured if they were on the side of the roof. I mean, quite frankly, it really wouldn't have been obscured if they were even in this spot. Where is it? Right here. Because you can tell if he had a shot on Trump, if what we're arguing, he wouldn't really have been obscured from the point of where this guy is. Not really, because we're talking about here and here. The guys were here, right? So look, maybe if he was all the way over here, which is why I think they're placing him there, right? But if he was anywhere in the middle, they would have had a shot. But that's not necessarily the point. The point is, this is who they're telling you shot. They're saying this is the sniper who killed him. Now, the point is there are 2 different snipers, right? And this is definitive. There are the ones with the baseball caps and the ones with the floppy hats. And that was on a different building, as you can tell. And that was the shot we were talking about, which is, you know, this building and then this building further back, right? So if they're claiming this guy shot, let's take a look at how they reacted. Okay, so that is, you can see there's Trump and those are the ones to his right. Okay. So this is them. And this is timed with the first sound of any shot you hear. I think it's really interesting that what you're going to see is this person look up from their scope. And by the way, I mean, I should actually give this one too. About 7 minutes beforehand, you see them looking with their binoculars and in the same direction. Look. That is, now that we've seen the full map, that's looking right in the direction of the shooter.
Right.
And they're looking 7 points.
That's when I left office. That was,
and then it jumps to 42 seconds before, and that's where we are with this video.
it's a little bit over.
You're going to see is he jump up out of his scope and then fall back in and do something. I don't know. I can't confirm it was a shot, but watch the logic.
That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Okay, so in any situation right there, if this guy just saw a sniper shoot at Donald Trump, you think he would wait to shoot?
No.
No, right?
No.
So the argument is that he either shot right there, which seems odd with the way he, you know, he like a jumpy, jolting shot, which kind of seems inaccurate. Either way, he looked up and noticed something. He clearly just saw what happened, right? I think that's obvious. So if he was shot by this guy, when did that happen? So my point is, you can watch, and this angle goes this way, but the larger shots, that's the first reaction. That's what's credited with taking that shot. But we have the other video that just showed the last sound being the one that killed that guy.
Right.
So again, there may be something that makes sense. To me, it's an inconsistency, which screams that we're being lied to about something bigger.
There was a video I was seeing if I could find it, but it was like a girl in her car, and it was an Instagram video, and she was saying that I don't know which direction she was saying because she kept saying the left, but I don't know which left that would mean.
Right,
so, so the directionality is kind of irrelevant unless you have context. But she kept saying this is coming from the left. And she's like, people are gaslighting me, telling me that I don't know.
Oh, I have that.
You have that, okay? And she's like, I'm a mom.
She deleted the video.
Did she?
And I don't know if that's pressure from the party to stop, making this hard for everybody, or she realized it was wrong.
Right.
There's actually 2 people now, I have both of them, where they're talking about the shots coming from and now she does confirm. The other guy you could argue is a little bit mixed up with the what left he's talking about.
Yeah.
She makes it very clear. She says, here's where I am. Yeah. It's to Trump's left, my right. It's very clear.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I am going to try to explain in detail where I was in front of Trump and what happened to the left of Trump, which would have been to the right of me. First and foremost, let me show you how close I was to put it in perspective. So with Trump facing me, I was to his left, but I was pretty close up there. Now let me show you the bleachers to the left of Trump, but to the right of me. Okay, so there's the bleachers to the left of Trump right there, which was to the right of me. The unaliving happened to the bleachers on the far right side of Trump. I'm over on the far right or far left of Trump. These are the same bleachers. Watch the top left. These are the same exact bleachers. These are to the left of Trump. Those shots came from the back. Now watch it in slow motion. They came from the back. Those bullets came from the back left.
I think that you can see what you're looking for, right? So that could clearly be coming from behind them, which there's plenty. Actually, I'll finish the video. Plenty of people are in the crowd going over there.
Yeah.
But if you see the plume, as I think other people argued, you could say water tower, that was a shot from the water tower that took the two people out in the crowd right there, then hit, and that's where the plume would come from. So it went that way. It's just, again, speculation. It's hard to tell.
Trump. Now let me show you what happened after those shots were fired.
There were people in that stand. You can see the little tower right there.
Hard for me to see, but yeah.
Yeah.
That was on the left side of Trump, where people are saying that shots were fired from behind the bleachers, and you can clearly see them like telling Secret Service, it's from over there, it came from over there, and you can see people looking from behind the bleachers. This timeline of events that I just showed you all came from the left of Trump on my side. I don't know what happened on Corey's side. I don't, and I'm
That's the fireman that was shot on the other side of the bleachers.
so sorry for what happened to him, but he is not the man that I saw. He's not. Something happened on the left side of the event.
That's the gist of it. So what's important is that, and they could be wrong.
Right.
There could be a sound that echoed the other way. Who knows? But it's interesting that no one seems to want to address this. And here is the other guy.
To the program here, but Lester Holt, NBC News, just reporting.
And this girl's got to be one of the worst reporters I've ever had to watch in my life.
That one of the attendees has deceased, has died from injuries as a result of the shooting. Joseph, you told me off camera that you may have witnessed this, and I'm so sorry to be talking to you in this tragic moment, but can you describe what it is that you saw?
I was attending the rally. I was in the set of bleachers, the very far left of the podium where President Trump was speaking. I was there with friends. I heard several gunshots. The man beside me suffered a gunshot wound to the head.
Right beside him.
Was instantly killed. Fell to the bottom of the bleachers. Another woman looked like she got hit in the forearm or hand. And then at that point in time, it was rather chaotic at that point because half the people were looking because they thought it was fireworks. I knew it was gunshots right away. My friend, he hit the deck. I was kind of looking around just trying to see where the shots were coming from. It seemed to me like the shots were coming from behind the bleachers. It seemed to me the man got hit in the head.
That's the gist. It goes on for like 6 more minutes, but it's the same point. And he really stresses that he thought it was from behind them.
Right.
So, it's people for decide for themselves. I just think that nobody wants to address these things. So back to the point about the sniper and the same is that if it seems to be a discrepancy between the timing of when he shot, who shot him, where his body was, nobody wanted to pay attention that he was there, the discrepancy around where he bought a ladder, bought ammo, and then somehow crawled these things up on the building, but then you don't see him moving those things with him on the building.
Right.
Like there's so many things that just seem almost like in your face, inaccurate.
Right.
Yeah, but this is the time of internet speculation, right? So people everyone's diving in, which is, I think that's a good thing. As long as we have discernment and we're willing to go just because someone pieces something together, we should still, but that's the problem is that the system is engineering people that want to assume, and that's for their interest, but yeah, it's interesting. So what do you think so far? I think these things are pretty inconsistent, right?
Yeah. I have a lot more questions than answers.
Yeah,
at this point.
right. Well, here, this will give you one more question.
Correct. So that sniper team that was in the AGR building, they're the first ones that went up on the roof.
So that's interesting right there. He's saying the sniper team that was in the building that he was on went up there first. That's completely contradicted by the local official who said that local police went up, and then the whole story about how they tried to look and then he fell 8 feet, hurt himself, right? And it was like a defensive move and he fell. That completely contradicts that.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
You see, it's a big fall.
It is.
Correct. So that sniper team that was in the AGR building, they're the first ones that went up on the roof. They were the first to encounter the dead assassin at that point in time.
I guess you could argue the first to like get up on it and look at him as opposed to trying and falling. Certainly possible.
Later on, other people joined them, and somebody told them to send the pictures they had taken to an ATF agent, which I think is very strange. And we called up that ATF agent. That individual said that he was with ATF, and now he's gone dark. We've also reached out to the Secret Service agents in charge on the ground. All we're getting there is a runaround. So we are getting information from local law enforcement, and we appreciate that. But unfortunately, federal law enforcement agents, they're just saying, well, go through your congressional liaison. Again, that's going to be unacceptable. I wish I could rely and have faith in the FBI and the Secret Service to do a truthful accounting of this, but that's not been my experience with the Russian collusion hoax, and for years dealing with.
So what do you think? Right? I mean, clearly he could be making that up. Right? But so it just taking it at face value for conversation, that's pretty interesting. So he's saying that a Secret Service went up on the roof, took photographs, which seems to be some. It looks like from a drone, by the way. Where were those during the actual event?
Yeah,
good to know.
no drone.
But so the point being that he says they then were instructed to give it to an ATF agent, or did, and then that person is no longer giving them that information. I mean, I think if we wanted a reason to think they want us to feel like there's something wrong, this would be that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is just either wildly incompetent or deliberately confusing.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a combination at play, honestly.
Yeah. No more thoughts?
Than that, no, I really don't. I mean, I think they intentionally want to confuse because this way that's part of like what disinfo is, right? Like they want to overwhelm, confuse, so the people are bickering over it without anything really substantial. It's a traumatic event. I didn't live through JFK, but I've heard from people that it was traumatic for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Whether you were Democrat, Republican, I mean, to watch your president be assassinated is incredibly traumatic and earth shattering. And I think that, again, regardless of whether you feel this wasn't, fortunately he survived, but it's still a very jarring kind of a moment. I don't think it was a huge surprise to people. A lot of people I know, I was told by, people who work in security, that sort of thing. They said this is going to be the summer of political assassination. I hope that this was just one failed attempt and that we don't see more, but we were warned that. And I think that if they
a little suspicious though, right? Like being a little conspiratorial. I mean, like the idea that this would be something that would be predicted and floated, both Alex Jones and other people as well, which is not hard to point out. You can say, I mean, I've heard people say that about Trump for years now, and finally come, so maybe it's just a statement that gets made every so many months. And, but so the point is that, we shouldn't also box out the possibility that there was some level of engineering in order to benefit Donald Trump. And I mean, just like not from any staging event of it all, but like, realistically, if we're talking about something, and let me be clear, I don't think it's that unlikely that somebody could have tried to do this with the intention of trying to scare him and either shooting his ear by or however you want to look at that. Honestly, again, I don't think the evidence points that way, but the idea that this has like in so many clear ways benefited Trump's people like Zuckerberg and others have leaned into him now and supported him. Like, it's very weird
that that it was such a heroic kind of.
It's very strange.
Yeah, I mean it is, and I would argue that is the result that it had. I don't know that was the intention. However, I'm just saying in terms of the speculation that there would be political assassinations, I do think they're going to try for more. I do think we should be prepared for that. But all that to say that this had such a understandably reaction from people, whether you like Trump, whether you didn't like Trump. I mean, the left was cheering. Oh my gosh, they should have gotten him. I can't believe they missed. And the
same stuff we see from the right in the reverse situation. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, but
It's disgusting either way.
Right.
Yeah.
But the point being, I'm talking about the reactions. This isn't a judgment on, only these people do that. This is more of a statement of how impactful it was.
Right.
And so with the parasite class, as I call them, are masters of trauma-based mind control. So they're taking this incident, which I would argue is a mass scale traumatic event, and now they're clouding the space, the information space, with lots of information. Some of it, of course, is legitimate people trying to piece things together, and some information I think is being presented is what evidence we have is real. But I think that it's also being clouded intentionally, because what happens when you have people who are now demoralized are in a position to be destabilized, and that's a great breeding ground for programming, for for them to implement whatever it is they want to do next. And I do think that they really do want to try and polarize and create whatever kinds of violent tensions they can.
And we're talking about, again, just the deep, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. And I think this is a good breeding ground for that. And I think having people back and forth arguing over what actually happened is a great. I don't want to. I'm not trying to undermine it. So I don't want to be misconstrued when I say it this way. But it's a good. I hesitate to even use the word distraction, because it's not that it's not important.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
But it's a good focal point while they're marching on with their plans.
Right. And the point that hesitating right there is only because the point being is that even there, it's always important to seek out the truth and do investigation, but nonetheless, things are still used to keep us trapped in these cycles. Like that's why what we try to strive for is being objective, trying to say, here's what we have in front of us, here's the evidence. And a lot of times it just stalls there. And a lot of people then just try to make it into something, right? Let's piece this together, and here's what the story is. Well, sometimes it is, we just don't know yet, and we may never know, and so that's where we need to be. Otherwise, you get pulled in, like she's talking about, where you end up debating and arguing, was this no playing, the same thing on 9/11 or any number of events, which again are important to have these conversations about. But it is used against you in a lot of ways. And a lot of times you get people like this that will muddy the waters and step in the conversation from a side and put in some, some convincing deep fake or something like that, the video we might have seen. And all of a sudden you get these arguments about things, and then that gets mired, and that's how that happens.
And the narratives get derived from that.
Right.
And I think for me, that's the most important thing, is regardless of, what stance you take or what narrative you think is accurate, I think it's really important for people not to get caught up to the point where they play reactionary.
Right.
And that's, I think, what they're banking on. So yeah, you worded it well. That's, I'm reticent. I don't want to be like, oh, it's a distraction, meaning it's insignificant. It's of course significant.
Right. It'd be insignificant if it wasn't even real. I mean, it's a significant event. Clearly it's being used as all of them always are,
and we should seek out the truth and the reality of the circumstance. But I think that all of the information that's being put there, like Nietzsche says, they muddy the waters to make it look deep. And I think they're intentionally trying to create a lot of confusion to divide people.
Absolutely.
These narratives can grow from there.
Yeah. Well, a good place to end on today. I think, it's an important conversation, whether this applies to the recent event or any other way that they're trying to convince you, whatever we're talking about. Just people are always out there trying to manipulate you for their benefit. That's just the way the world works. And there's also good people trying to inform you, they're out there. So I just think it's important that we try to overlook or, ignore as best we can the partisan sides of it all. And I know that's really hard for people because it's identity. You become invested in this. You want to be a part of it. You find a home sometimes. You find identity in it. You find, comfort in the side of it all, and that's a big part of the way they divide us. And, all I'm saying is if you find that comfort in that's a good thing, but just make sure you're still willing to question even people that are certain within that, because people who are certain just sometimes make mistakes too.
Of course, we all make mistakes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and this whole idea of the identity, that is what the Frankfurt School did. And they created the identity politics, and it was by design. So,
and I'll tell you, the right loves to pretend like it's only the left involved in that, but it is an equal game where they're both playing in regard to their woke identity politics.
Dialectic.
Yeah. As I think Daniel McAdams said that underneath the tweet about the whole, cancel culture from the right thing I covered, where he goes, well, they're just the woke of the right. And it's, they hate
Woke
that
right.
like nothing else. But the reality is you're doing the same thing, you
but
know?
the woke right is just as bad, if not in some ways worse.
Right.
But
Right.
You know, at least you expect it from the left.
Yeah.
I'll tell people everybody should come to the Cognitive Liberty Conference because we'll talk about dialectics and we'll try and demystify it for people. So that's cognitivelibertyconference.com.
Outstanding.
So,
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, remember to be a dissident.
Yes.